seats today.
Okay, we're on.
Okay, we'll come to order. Today is the Wednesday, April 15th, regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission. Could we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Berman, Commissioner Lee,
Here.
Commissioner Cheats,
Here.
Torgerson,
Here.
Chairperson Kate.
Here, report regarding posting of agenda.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, April 8th, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Would you please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, could we have any comments or corrections? Any comments or corrections to the approval, or the minutes rather, of March 18th? And absent any comments or corrections, could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion second. Please call roll for approval of minutes.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Cheats,
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Abstain.
and Chairperson Kate.
Aye, and a vote of 3-0 with one abstention. The minutes of March 18th were approved. Moving on to agenda item 5, oral communications. I have no cards to speak on. Oral communications. We're going to go slightly off of agenda for just a few minutes. We're going to handle something under item 9, Planning Department updates, and we'll throw this over to Mr. Bogart, and please continue.
Okay.
Chair Kane and members of the commission, I'd like to present to you Colin Bogart. He's with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition, and he's working with the city on a place grant, and he'd like to explain a little bit about the projects that he's working on.
Chairman Kane, Commissioners, good evening. As she said, my name is Colin Bogart. I'm with the Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. I do have a couple of slides to show you with this presentation. The project I'm working on with the City of Glendale is called the PLACE Grant. It stands for Policies for Livable, Active Communities and Environments. And the idea is that if you improve the built environment to encourage daily walking and biking, you will improve the overall public health. The Bike Coalition is a recipient of this grant, and I am working here at City Hall for the next couple of years. And I have multiple city partners. We're working with Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, the Planning Department, the Police Department, as well as Public Works in collaboration. And we are ultimately seeking to develop what we're calling the Safe and Healthy Streets Plan. The Safe and Healthy Streets Plan seeks to implement existing policies that support biking and walking in the city of Glendale. We also anticipate drafting a set of suggested new policies that we would like the city to ultimately consider. And in the not-too-distant future, I'll be doing a series of public community meetings in which we hope to collect feedback and input from the community at large as far as what they would like to see in this plan. We do have a website set up for this project. The web address is right here. It's www.la-bike.org/Glendale. And that's our primary conduit for information. And we update that pretty regularly. I'm looking to do a Spanish version and an Armenian version in the not-too-distant future. So I gave each of you a postcard that has the graphic and the web address, and I hope you will have a look at that and come back and take a look at it often. I would also like to let you know of a couple of events coming up real quickly. This coming Saturday, we have the Glendale History Ride. The ride is going to start and end at the Glendale Transportation Center. It's the historic train station. Meet at 9:30 a.m. It's going to be a free ride. It's approximately about 12 miles. We're going to have members of the Glendale Historical Society on hand who are going to be talking about each location as we stop there. We also plan on doing a little food stop somewhere along the route. And more details can be found at the web address la-bike.org/Glendale, or people can call 818-334-9731 if they want to get more details. As I said, this is a free ride. Helmets are required. Also, we don't advise children under 9 do this ride unless they have a trailer bike or a seat or some sort of trailer. Also, real quick, would like to mention that upcoming Thursday, May 14th, is Bike to Work Day, where we encourage people to try biking to work. And then hopefully if they like it, they will continue to do so. And there's going to be more details about that on the website as well. And then finally, just wanted to let you know if you need to reach me, I'm at City Hall at least 4 days a week. My email is Colin, COLIN, at la-bike.org or 818-334-9731. And I appreciate you allowing me to jump to the head of the agenda tonight, and wanted to see if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them.
Any comments or questions from the commissioners?
I have a comment.
Oh.
I didn't know we were going to speak about this evening, but just so happens this morning I was driving up Glen Oaks. I'm not a bike rider, but I know there are issues. See articles in the paper talking about issues and concerns between bikers and non-bikers. But as driving up Glen Oaks, where it narrowed down going up towards Mountain, there was a group of bikers, and I could see them. And going into the neighborhood, they stayed double two abreast. And the street's barely wide enough for a car to go by. I expected them to just narrow down to one, go behind, and they didn't. They stayed doubled up. So I waited and waited, and the traffic backed up. So I slowly went around when it was safe and rolled the window down just to say, you'd make it easier if you would, and I wanted to continue and say, if you would go to single when the street narrows. I got about 2 words out, and I got hit with profanity you can't believe. And so I've read these items happening between bikers and cars, and I imagine it goes both ways. But I was taken aback by the fact that they just immediately jumped on me. And all I was trying to do was make a comment. Maybe they were defensive, and maybe they were afraid. I don't know. So, I now see that this is an issue, and it can be something we really need to be concerned about. And now I see you're talking about safe and health relative to bike riding. So it's going to be a critical issue, especially with all the traffic we already have in the city. So something very important.
No, duly noted. I think there's bad behavior on both sides.
I think so.
And I think the important thing that we need to do is figure out a way to get the cyclists and the motorists to all get along with each other and to cooperatively share the streets, because there's not really the space for us to stripe bike lanes all over the place. Right. And there's even less space to put in things like a dedicated path. So we're going to have to figure out a way to coexist on the street. And I'm sorry that you had that experience.
No, it just shows what can happen. So something to keep in mind.
Absolutely, I agree.
Your card of the mission statement talks about a better, safer place to ride or walk. So, we are seeing your initial programs about, encouraging people to ride.
Yes.
Do you have a program in place, or are you planning to put programs in place to increase the aspect of safety and, biker, rider, pedestrian cooperation?
Yes, I think part of this plan, or a large part of this plan, is going to include an education component. There's actually 5 E's that I think are going to be critical for the whole plan. It's going to be education, engineering, enforcement, encouragement, and evaluation. And with those 5 E's, if we address all 5 of those in this plan, I think we'll actually get somewhere. If we fail to address each of those 5 E's, then I think we're basically building a table without one of the legs. So it's really important that we address all of those. And I do think that education is going to be a big factor.
And you've got 2 years to do it, huh?
Well, my goal is to set the system in place. My goal is to introduce the policy recommendations that ultimately the city ideally will adopt, and then it will continue forward into the future even after I'm gone. So I'm not necessarily here to run the programs. I'm here to try to put them in place, if that makes sense.
Any other comments from commissioners?
So on your website, do you have timetable where we can join? Not only for those 2 days that you mentioned, but maybe other weekends if I want to join the group.
Yeah, I do have, if people just send me an email to that email address, colin@la-bike.org, and tell me that they would like to be on an email list, which I have put together, there's no time limit to that. I'm always adding new people to that list. As far as upcoming meetings, I haven't set the official dates for those yet, but we're looking at doing the community meetings in July and August. We're talking about doing about 5 of them, and then we're going to put a draft of the plan together and then come back next spring to ask the community to review the draft version, do any tweaks, and then ultimately the timeline right now is to have a final version for submission, ideally, towards the end of 2010.
All right, thank you very much.
I would have moved over for you.
I know you would have.
I see no other comments, so we'll close this agenda item, and we appreciate you coming before us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item we have is under appeals. It's an old business item. Let me read some introductory comments. I suppose we then introduce the item, but I want to have a discussion just briefly because of the reason that we tabled it before. I should reintroduce it and then have a discussion if we might continue, for example.
That's correct, Mr.
Great. All right, so allow me to do that. So the next item, and actually it's the next 2 items, are appeals from the decision of the zoning administrator or the zoning hearing officer. The matter is heard as a de novo hearing. Testimony given at the zoning administrator's hearing should be repeated because the commission does not review the tapes of those meetings. Decisions rendered today will be based on the evidence presented at this hearing and the evidence in file, including appeal documents, staff reports, and letters received. Individuals speaking today should therefore present all of the evidence which they may wish this commission to consider. A handout describing the appeals process is available at the front counter. So under item 6A, old business, it's variance case number PVAR 2008-014. This matter was continued from March 4th, so a lot of what I've said about de novo hearings would not necessarily apply. We would still consider the information we heard on March 4th. The location is 120 East Cypress Street. It's an appeal by the owner of the zoning administrator's denial of a standards variance to allow an open parking space in the front yard setback where landscaping would otherwise be required. The recommendation is that the decision of the zoning administrator denying the standard variance case be sustained and the appeal being denied. Now, before we continue, one of the reasons we continued this is we had hoped that we would have our 5th board member, since it's always nice to have a majority opinion as opposed to, for example, a tie. He's not able to appear today. I would like to hear the commissioner's thoughts about continuing it yet again, or actually moving forward with the 4 people that have already heard this, and whether we should continue today or continue to a date certain. Anybody like to weigh in on their thoughts?
I think you might want to ask if any of us, one of us, changed our, our decisions on this case. Maybe then you might have a.
I'm not sure if I'm comfortable actually asking this at that stage until we actually have the hearing. I guess my thought is, are we prepared to just move forward, and if the vote's 2-2 or 3-1 or 4-0, that's the way it'll be.
I just had a quick question regarding if I
I'm
can.
sorry, for record name.
Oh, my name is Brian Chan. I'm representing 120 East Cypress. I forgot what the case number is.
Okay, well, we've got that on the record.
sure.
You're okay.
Okay, I was asking if I could make some pauses. I'm trying to introduce what the current situation is. This is the neighborhood in which the apartment is in.
Maybe you want
And there's some.
to.
Oh, you could
turn
you
off
could
the
look.
light. Or lower the light.
Better for the TV.
Sorry, this is taken from my vehicle. This street is, I believe, Chevy Chase. Oh, we're turning on to Chevy Chase right now. So there's front parking right there. And Chevy Chase. You can turn off the volume. If
You're asking an awful lot.
okay. And we're going to be turning on to Glendale, and we're going to be approaching Cypress. There's some properties I'd like to point out. And we're going to be approaching Cypress any minute, right after, I believe that is...
We're approaching your address in East Cypress or West
Yes,
Cypress?
East Cypress. And we're going to be making a loop around.
This is Glendale.
That's the Glendale studio, and then we're going to be passing this, I believe, semi-residential, or is it a school with front parking as well? Another place with front parking, the front setback. And that is a repair shop, repair facility.
Can you pause it for just a second? I have
But we're
a
going to be
question.
turning around. And
Well, nonetheless, I still have a question for
Sure.
staff. And, or maybe they can answer on the fly, but I don't want to take away from your presentation.
oh,
Basically, those areas with the front setback, do we know the zone those were in?
It's
Some
C3
commercial.
zone, commercial zone.
Has this been shared with staff already? Or is this the first
No,
time
I
you've
just
seen it?
Oh.
received it from him.
I came earlier too.
Okay, all right, thank you. Just wanted to know the zones.
Okay. As you can see, there's also parking, basically parking in the front setback, though it's a driveway right there, and that's the Toyota dealership. And they're also parking in front setback. What I'm trying to present right now is we're talking about what the variance was meant for. It was basically meant, this is the your place. My place in question. And we're going to be seeing more parking in the front setback as well, right there. And that's also, that's basically a car repair facility. Right up there is, I'm pretty sure that's a residential, and there's parking, clearly parking in the front setback as well. And this is within the jurisdiction in which I was supposed to send out flyers. That's also a repair facility, parking in the front setback. So what I'm trying to say is what the variance was, or the code that I'm supposedly violating was meant for a heavily residential area. This clearly is more commercial-based, more commercial/industrial. Not to disparage my neighborhood, of course. Will we proceed? Or did it pause?
It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone?
No, it's going.
Oh, okay. And we're going to also see, we're going to be making a right turn. I believe that this is Magnolia. Onto Shakey's. So right now we're seeing a lot of parking lots. And we're going to be seeing a lot more parking lots. And this was taken basically around 4 o'clock, and you can already see the street is pretty much congested. This is the Volkswagen dealership This is right on Maryland. And this is a huge, large parking lot. There's no front setback at all, which the city of Glendale approved to remove. The Toyota dealership, big parking structure. And we're seeing congested parking. And what my point is, what the 128 West Cypress, there was parking in front setback. Okay, what we're trying to say is 128 West Cypress, the reason why the variance was allowed was because parking was removed from their case, and that's why they were granted the variance. What City of Glendale did over the past decade or so was take away, basically increase the size of the dealerships. So you have more, there's a big empty lot, and you're going to see front setback parking as well coming up. Trash, very little front setback with the Glendale studio. And right about 20 seconds, we'll see clear violation, front setback parking, basically a block away. And I'm not sure why they're not filing an appeal along with me, but I guess they're not cited. And what I'm trying to say is the City of Glendale allowed Toyota and Volkswagen to increase the size of their maintenance and sales lots, thus increasing their consumer base as well as employees without making any adjustments to how many people they've employed and what their on-site parking allows. Basically, my Cypress Street as well as Maryland and Magnolia is basically overflow parking for their consumers. And we're going to be seeing West Cypress in a few. We're basically seeing more commercial/industrial settings. And as soon as we see West Cypress, there's basically going to be a front setback parking from a church in a residential area.
Turn on the
And I believe this is West Cypress. We're going to make a U-turn, and then we're going to see the West Cypress as well as church. This, but front setback parking in the driveway as well. And more parking. Okay, that right there is West Cypress, the one that was allowed, and we're going to be seeing church all the way at the end. Right there. That's basically overpaved parking for the church. And that's basically the video. So what we're saying is, Commissioner Torgensen already pointed out that we're basically a commercial. I mean, it's basically a residential/commercial area, and it's already basically conforming to the area standards in terms of parking. Our variance is not different at all to the variance set forth in the 128 West Cypress parking. The only difference is there are the 2 units, we're the 10 units. And that's basically it.
Questions for the appellant? Just a couple. I know you told us before, but for how many years has that, in general, I know you...
Yeah, I did the
lately.
math. It was off. It's basically 20. We've had the building for 26 years, nearly 30 years.
And you're testifying that you've had a vehicle pretty much parking there all that time?
Yes.
And that was prior to the current,
I'm sorry?
that was prior to the current code prohibiting front setback.
Well, they're telling me the code was somewhat in place way back when, back in 1930s, which doesn't really make sense to me. I don't understand. But then they showed me the current codes, and that's where we're running into conflict.
Any other questions for the appellant at this time? No. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to add at this moment?
Not really. Aside from the fact that you did see the two large parking lots right on Maryland, which is half a block away from our neighborhood, from the proposed variant site, and there's basically no front setback with Volkswagen at all. It's just a big chain link fence and then just overpaved with sales, a sales lot.
All right. Mr. Torgerson?
At the risk of leading the witness, may I
Sure.
ask you if, I noticed in your video there were there's several streets where there was no parking, no cars parked at all on the right-hand side. Was that a trash day or a special?
What day did? Well, on Thursdays and Fridays, those are the days where there's street cleaning during the.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to park.
So people tend to avoid one side because they sometimes forget or are too lazy to move their vehicles and they get cited. Trash days are on Mondays, I believe now. It was Tuesdays, so the waste management does move containers out into the sidewalk to prepare for the larger vehicles to dispose of the trash, and that also takes away parking. So we're basically, as you can see, our street's pretty much impacted by street cleaning, the dealerships, as well as other governmental.
Yeah, in other words, the apparent availability of street parking shown in the video was because of prohibition against parking for a particular reason, like
Exactly.
trash or street cleaning purposes.
Exactly.
So that
And if you would go there later on in the night, that was taken mid-afternoon. Parking will fill up as tenants do come home.
because when I drove by the property last March or whenever it was, into February, there was virtually no parking anywhere on the street in the 3 or 4 blocks around that area.
Exactly. So, and we all basically the zoning administrators, as well as I believe you guys saw in the previous previous meeting, we basically agreed that both variants are extremely similar. There's basically no difference aside from the fact that I already have a parking pad in front and I'm not applying for one. It's already in place.
I think for clarification purposes, I think the time when you submitted the variance, I don't think the ZA had the information that you were proposing to do grasscrete.
Sure.
And then in the middle of the course that you are now proposing to have the grasscrete. Just to be to clarify that point.
But in all fairness, we did have a meeting before the filing of the appeal of the meeting. We did have a meeting as they presented. We did have a meeting, and they did say we could have grasscrete and it would be feasible.
And you're proposing right now to
Which
Yeah,
we're,
put
which
the
we're
request-
proposing, which
Okay.
we were proposing,
You'd welcome that as a condition.
we were welcoming as a condition.
Thank you for reminding us of that.
You forgot about that.
Any other questions at this time for the appellant? All right, thank you very much, sir. I would like to hear some closing comments from staff.
Thank you, Chairman Kane and Commissioners.
Mr. Chair,
oh.
sorry, I didn't want to, just to interrupt briefly, did you have any other cards or
No, that's
anything?
it.
I want to make
Yeah,
sure that
just
anybody
note
from the
that.
public who wants to address the additional testimony provided has the opportunity to do so.
Just for the record, we have no other cards on
Okay,
this matter.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kane and Commissioner. Again, this was the first time staff viewed the video. The video, the staff understand the intent of the video and why the appellant is providing clips of the neighborhoods. But again, this neighborhood the video covered a sizable portion of the city. And based on the various streets that the videos was taken, it covered many properties covering a multitude of zoning designation. So it's not correct to say, as stated by the appellant, that they are parking in a setback and the city allows that in all cases. Each zones have very distinct zoning requirements. So we cannot simply group all properties and say and assume that they are zoned the same way just by the fact that you see front setback parking. So I just want to clarify that point. And additionally, again, this item came from neighborhood services, and whether the existing parking has been in existence for a long time, it was never permitted by staff. It was never reviewed and approved by staff. So unfortunately, this parking space was inherited by the applicant and appellant when the property was purchased. So nonetheless, the years that have lapsed between the time the property changed hands to 2009, in our eyes, from the planning perspective, this spot is still illegal. So whether it be grasscrete, concrete, presented right now under the existing condition, it is still not acceptable and does not meet the zoning code, which is the reason why staff recommends that the Planning Commission sustain the zoning administrator decision in denying this appeal. Thank you.
All right. Questions for staff?
I'll just ask relative to the video. You made mention about the different zoning areas. When he mentioned about the car lots having parking around them, what zone are they in?
Most of the dealerships in the city of Glendale are located in the South Branch specific plan, and there are a number of zoning designations. So depending on which lot, which block, it could be CAO, CG, CS, correct.
What do they mean? If I see a parking lot with a fence around it and it's on a corner?
But nonetheless, they're all commercial zone. In commercial zones, we allow setback in the front provided that there's a buffer between the car display area or the parking area and the public right-of-way, which is the sidewalk.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay. Actually, that was one of the questions I had. So let's just step back in time a little bit. The residential code, R2250, right, the zone? Was there ever a time when the code was silent on front yard setbacks, at least in recent or available memory? When did this first become 2250? Do you happen to know roughly? I presume it's always been a residential zone of some sort.
It's always, this property has always been a residential zone. Previously, prior to the current zoning designation, I would assume it may have been an R2, an R3, or even R4 zoning designation.
But those previous zones, was there always language in our code as it related to front yard setbacks and parking?
Yes, correct.
So as long as it's been zoned, there's been some sort of a prohibition against it.
Correct.
All right. When the auto dealers began developing along Brand, are they granted parking exceptions? They don't park to code, correct? Well, that's a little harsh to say. They have their own little special zone. But are any of those nearby parking dealerships granted parking exceptions beyond their little special zone? Do you happen to know offhand if?
Parking overlay. Correct.
I'm sorry,
Well,
Edith, would you, rather than just feed it, maybe you could just say it.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, most of those properties have parking overlay zone. Whether it's residential or multifamily, they are allowed to have parking lots or parking structures.
For the storage of vehicles.
Exactly.
What are they required to park for square footage of showroom?
The parking requirement for a dealership is considered a retail establishment, so the parking is one space per 250 square feet of floor area.
4 per thousand?
Yes.
Okay. So the showrooms are parked at 4 per thousand. The rest of it is just the density of their sales units. Anything else for staff right now?
Question.
Mr. Torgerson?
Not sure when this 10-unit apartment was built, but if there were prohibitions against parking in that area, how was it allowed to have been built with 7 parking places in the back and 1 in front 5 years ago or whenever it was built?
Well, again, as stated in the staff report, this property is considered legal non-conforming, which means that when, at the time construction took place, the project met code in terms of the number of density and the number of parking spaces. Over time, zoning codes and zoning requirements have changed. Thus, most older properties throughout the city, whether it be commercial or residential, have some legal non-conforming status or aspect to it.
So what you're saying is the code had parking requirements, but they were much, much less.
Right.
Although they were still very careful to make sure you couldn't park in the front yard. Okay. Anything else from staff? Okay, procedurally, I'm not really sure how this works, but since there was only the appellant and the staff, I'm just going to ask the appellant if he had any closing rebuttal-type remarks.
In rebuttal to Administrator Dong's stating that our zone is residential, what I showed you where the Toyota dealership and Volkswagen dealerships were, those were zoned residential. Those were changed to commercial to conform with whatever code necessary to erect and flatten those residential zones for the sales lots. So why then, I mean, it was zoned residential, so it couldn't have there wouldn't be parking in the front setback as well as not a large structure. So we're willing to rezone our property as commercial so we could have parking in the front setback. It was residential before, but City of Glendale for the past decade or two decades has allowed for the commercialization of the area, the neighborhood, thus reducing our parking, thus making it more commercialized, thus allowing front setback parking. Once again, we are not setting a precedence. Precedence has already been set in 128 West Cypress. There is no greater point I'd like to make.
Would you restate that?
There's no greater point I'd like to make that we are not setting a precedence. Precedence has been set
What do you mean
with
by that?
128 West Cypress
do you
for the
mean?
front setback parking.
So what do you mean by that?
What the previous meeting said was my proposed variance is setting a precedence. So, but we're not in fact setting a precedence.
Relative
Precedents
to
are-
what? Are you saying that relative to your new evidence or relative to the fact that
Relative to
you're
the fact
parking
that
there?
it's already been, I'm sorry?
Relative to the fact that you're already parking there?
No, relative to the fact that 128 West Cypress has created a special allowance for front setback parking. we're not creating the precedents. We're just asking for the precedents, or asking for the extension granted for 128 West Cypress be extended to us, because we do have reduced parking.
So
Sure.
just let me rephrase what you said and see
Sure.
if I understand what you said.
Okay.
You are saying that granting you the variance would not be precedent-setting
Would not be.
because the precedent has already been set by 128 Cypress.
I appreciate your rephrasing.
Yeah, thank you.
In a sentence.
All right. Any other questions? I'm sorry, anything else, sir?
Nothing at the moment.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, any other comments or questions for the appellant? Any questions for staff? I do have one question for staff. It's 2250 now. Under whether it was R2 or R3 on the previous zone, what was the density under the previous zoning before it became 2250? Was it identical density, less density, higher density?
I'll look at the South Brown specific plan. It may be in there.
Okay, when you do, we'll reopen the public hearing, because I'm about to close it and go into deliberations. But, okay. I was just getting confused by cards for a moment. Okay. We're going to close the public hearing. We'll enter into deliberations. We'll reopen when staff comes back with an answer to that. But in the short term, I'd like to start hearing from our commissioners their impressions on the case. Who'd like to commence? Now, remember, we have 3 hearings today, so
I know.
everybody's going to get their chance.
Be
but-
succinct.
Mine will be short. As I indicated in the past hearing that, this property, when I went there, I observed that, it was within the block of a brand, and it has been affected by the zoning overlays. And what I saw on the street was the commercialization of the street, and my comment at the time was that was to actually reverse the ZA's decision and then grant the grass creek from parking, and I have not changed from that.
All right.
Well, I'd like to echo those same comments. The variance process is designed to take care of situations that a general municipal code can't cover. They can't cover every single contingency, every single case, and so you have to have a variance process to be able to find ways of granting exceptions to that rule. And I think this is a prime candidate for a variance because of the situation in the neighborhood, the fact that the city's allowed all these other rezoning that put further burdens on the parking in the area, and for crying out loud, we're talking one parking place in front of this already underparked, that's a verb, underparked apartment building. So I'm likewise still inclined to overturn the zoning administrator's ruling and grant the variance.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sheets?
It's a tough issue. It is one car and it is one apartment building, but I've had a lot of time to think about it. I'll start out by saying that I think the zoning administrator did a good job. I understand why the decision was made, but that's why we have these hearings, so that we can get the evidence, we can get the information, think through the issues, have a deliberation where we get varied point of views. And my thoughts were in the beginning that, and I still feel this way, I feel strongly that all of these items that we're talking about can set precedent. And if at some point we don't take a stand and support and maintain the zoning rules, we lose control. And then one precedent leads to another precedent, and we lose control of what the intent is. So with that thinking in mind, that was the way my decision was leaning last time. And thinking back on the deliberation we had and comments from other commissioners, I do, let me sum it up quickly. My look at it is there is an issue around setting a precedent. But there's another issue that if we change the situation from what it is, we exacerbate the parking problem. It's compounded by the fact that the owner has been in the property for over 26 years, 26 to 28 years, and there was parking being done in that spot during that period of time. Now, in listening to the input again from the administrator, not from the administrator, from the planner, we're not real sure of what the zoning, at least at this point in time. I know we could find out, but there's some lack of clarity, at least in my mind, of whether people park there or were allowed to park in the setback back in those days or not. So the old code, in my mind, is not clear, at least at this point. And I think what helped me really kind of come to this decision now is the fact that nothing was being said, everything was fine. People were happy until the appellant tried to improve the situation, tried to improve the look of the residents and improve the quality of the parking spot. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here. It wouldn't be discussed. So it wasn't like he was trying to increase his parking as much as he was trying to improve what he thought he already had. So although I don't want, in my mind, this is not going to change my thought that I feel very strong about not setting precedents and not giving in to issues around variances. I think variances are there for a reason, but I also feel that the zoning is there for a reason, and we need to be very careful how we administer that. But in this case, although I didn't feel this way when we discussed it last time, I am leaning towards reversing the decision based on my thoughts and my feelings right now.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sheets. A month makes a difference. I have to say, first off, in terms of precedent, that I reject the applicant's suggestion that a precedent was set with the variance on a previous lot. I can appreciate him making it, but I totally reject it. Every hearing that we have, every variance hearing that the administrators or the hearing officers have, everything that comes in front of us is based on a specific property and a specific environment, and we fight every day, and I know zoning fights every day, to not establish precedents. So with all respect, I reject your argument. Likewise, I don't believe that granting your variance request will set a precedent for exactly the same reasons. You have a specific property in a specific location with specific impacts. I will say that the Grasscrete option down on West Cypress looks wonderful until there's a car parked on it. And then it looks like you've got a car sitting in your front yard.
Not an option. Where's that?
Not an option. I would have liked to have just cemented something that I have an opinion on by just finding out maybe that the zoning had changed and the density had increased, from previous situations, kind of creating more impact on the neighborhood. But I'm frankly convinced, and you did not make this argument a month ago, and it's one of the things that's helped persuade me today, was that the evolution and the increase of the car dealerships on Brand have clearly impacted this neighborhood in a unique way. And that, above all, persuades me that what this individual did 26, even though it was some years ago, was the result of parking pressure not necessarily created by his environment, but rather by other individuals and other things pushing into his neighborhood. Staff basically commented that the appellant had used a lot of areas that really weren't directly in his neighborhood. Without belaboring that point, frankly, a lot of those areas were in his neighborhood or were very similar neighborhoods impacted in a very similar way. So by his little drive around, and by the way, he should have probably rented a Steadicam. It would have been a lot easier, you know.
Got seasick.
Got seasick. But by just the number of situations that he showed, I don't know if any of those had variances. My suspicion is they don't, but by the same token, people all realize the situation they're in, and they've all decided to live and let live. So with that in mind, again, I'm prepared to grant the variance. I think I have another comment. Oh, I do, but let me just quickly, do you have that information?
I do.
Okay, we're reopening the hearing for the purposes of getting that information. What was the previous zoning density?
I have the zoning. As of 1983, the zoning was R4 with a parking overlay. In 1886, it
I'm
changed.
sorry, 1886?
19. In 1986, it changed to R2250 with a parking overlay. So it's always been multifamily. It's always had a parking overlay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm closing the public hearing. That doesn't necessarily support what I said anymore, but at least it doesn't detract from it. The only other comment I would have, it sounds like we're now unanimous in approving the appeal, would be that my opinion, in having driven past it again, is where we were looking at Grasscrete and battling over that before. If we're going to do Grasscrete, I wouldn't want them changing the footprint of what they've done. I'm frankly okay with the concrete. It kind of just sort of fits. But if they're going to do Grasscrete, it would just be in the area where the concrete is currently. And I don't feel strongly either way, but I wouldn't want to create a situation like on West Cypress where it's like a 90-degree turn into their front yard.
No, I agree. I think I never felt that the improvement looked bad. I'm not so sure I go along with the poles that are there, but I don't know that it makes a difference. But I think the concrete as it is, if in fact it is safe and meets standard, is fine, and I wouldn't want to change it or add to it. And I definitely would rather have that than the Grasscrete, because if it's not maintained, it doesn't look very good in my estimation.
Well, and that actually raises a great idea that maybe we condition getting rid of the poles and putting in a wheel stop.
I think it'd be better.
You just lower profile, less obstruction, and that's just thrown open for debate.
I agree with that
No, it's
suggestion.
not a bad idea. Visually, the impact of having just a curb, kind of a wheel stop situation instead of those poles probably would look nicer. I agree with everybody on the Grasscrete, or the lack thereof.
I would just add, I want to reiterate the point that I think the process is here to do what it did today. I think the zoning administrator and the planner did the right thing. They looked at the right items. I think that's a sense that's a message we want to put out there. And the fact that it came here shows that it was a difficult decision. But I think we were trying to do the right thing. I think we did the right things for the right reason. And obviously, it wasn't easy for us to discuss and come to a conclusion on the appeal. So I just wanted to mention that, and I think it was a good job, and I think we're doing the right thing now, too.
Okay. Mr. Sheets, I totally echo that. I'm extremely pleased that staff chose to try to enforce something like this, because this is Glendale, California, not Glendale, Kentucky.
Easy.
So, and I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry for any of the Kentuckians in the audience.
I didn't see a single
They'll
milk
all
carton.
nod. There's a reason they're here in California. So, all right. We're going to basically start to call for a vote, make the motion. I know Mr. Ferguson is starting on it, but we're going to need some rationale for obviously overturning the variance. My only last comment, and any other commissioners can certainly comment after that, is another rationale that I go through is that this has been in place for well over 2 decades. And the fact that no one, and building on what Mr. Torgerson, I believe, said, and building on the fact that no one came forward, that no one complained, that it fit into the neighborhood just fine, again, kind of emphasizes for me that it's certainly not contrary to the objectives of the ordinance in that I'm helping people craft a motion here. I don't think it's contrary to the objectives of the ordinance in that it's worked in the neighborhood, it's been accepted by the neighborhood, and if anything, it helps reduce in a very slight fashion the problems they have with street parking. Any other comments, or can we, may I call for a motion and ask for the rationale behind it?
Mr. Chair, just as a point of processing, Rather has prepared some findings. They're not exactly covering all the points that you
Okay.
made here,
Well,
obviously,
did
because
we get a
this is
copy
ahead
of
of time.
that?
Well, I'd rather look at the rather findings.
You do have the,
Rather.
you do have the option of just continuing
Try to
this for
write
2
it
weeks
from
for us to prepare findings, incorporating your rationale.
You know, well, actually, maybe that's not a bad idea. We can continue for 2 weeks to just let them do the footwork and formalize our comments. I really like that when I look at our agenda. The only thing I want to talk about it then is the consensus in terms of our conditions. Okay, we've got the rationale in place. Staff can build on that. The conditions that we've been talking about is grasscrete versus concrete, and then dealing with those bollards and whether we want to do anything with those. What's our thoughts?
I go along with you guys. I'm fine with the way it is.
The way it is, I think we should take the bollards out and put the parking curb
Wheel stop.
wheel stops in there. Other than that, I mean, I didn't look at it from a technical standpoint whether it was appropriate or safe, but from what I saw, it looks good and seems to be well constructed. So I wouldn't add any other.
Okay, and I would just add that this is going to be the right decision for 120 East Cypress Street in Glendale, California only.
Yeah.
So, well, for that case, we'll need a motion to continue to a date certain, which would be 2 weeks from today, for the purpose of staff preparing and expanding on the motions, on the motion to reverse.
So
Yes?
moved.
I was just going to say, the motion could be to direct staff to prepare, to come back with the
Yes,
findings.
well said, okay. Would someone like to make that motion?
I move that motion.
I second his motion.
Huh? What he said? What he said. The motion is what he said. Okay. All right. And
moved.
this is only our
Couldn't
first
say
hearing
it
today,
better.
guys.
I couldn't say it better.
I move to direct the staff to prepare the statement
Very good.
in 2 weeks.
And with the conditions.
With the conditions of what we have discussed here today.
We have a motion and a second to continue to April 29th with no, what?
May 6th.
May 6th.
May 6th is
Oh,
our next
sure,
meeting.
sure. Sorry. To May 6th with no further notification required. Call roll, please.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets,
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Aye.
Jefferson Kane,
Aye. On a vote of 4-0, the appeal variance case PVAR 2008-014 is continued to May 6th
Yes.
for the purposes of preparing a motion to overrule or to grant the variance, rather, and overrule the zoning administrator. Any... Oh, it's not on here. Okay, I have to paraphrase. Anybody unhappy with this decision? Well, no, we don't need to do that yet because it's continued for 2 weeks, so never mind on that.
You get 2 weeks to get unhappy.
Exactly right. Then I'll say it. So that concludes that. We're going to move on to Appeal 6B. The statements that I made prior to 6A about this being a de novo hearing remains in effect. This is a conditional use permit. At the conclusion of reading this into the record, we have a lot of cards. Anyone that's turned into a card through this point will be allowed 3 minutes, with the exception of the appellant, and their team would be allowed 15. I have a card from a Wayne Lewis or Zewis. Are you part of the team, or? No. Okay, well, you didn't indicate. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Interested party then. So what that means is, Mrs. Upremium, you and the business owner are working as a team in your cards. Well, however you'd like to do it. And all I will say to the audience, again, we have a lot of cards. Everyone's encouraged to participate in the process. But after I finish introducing the case, any other cards that get in will be allowed 1 minute instead of 3 minutes. So if you're sitting there holding on to the pink card thinking you'll get to be last, you may get to be last, but it'll be for 1 minute instead of the 3. Okay, so I'm going to read into the minutes that we are now working on new business, conditional use permit case number PCUP 2008-043. It's located at 1022 East Chevy Chase Drive, Suite A. It's an appeal by the applicant of the zoning administrator's denial of a conditional use permit to allow the on-site sales, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages at a new full-service restaurant known as Day Revolution. We have a recommendation to sustain the zoning administrator's denial of the conditional use permit and that the appeal be denied. Let's begin with staff comments, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. This again is case number PCUP-2008-043, a request to reverse the denial of conditional use permit to allow the on-site sales, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages at a new full-service restaurant establishment. I will quickly go over the project history. I will summarize the brief points. A more detailed project history is noted in your staff report. In August 2006, the application was filed to request a conditional use permit to allow the on-site sales, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages within Units A and Unit B located at 1022 East Chevy Chase Drive. In March of 2008, interdepartmental communication from Neighborhood Services Department to the zoning administrator requesting that the revocation of the CUP due to illegal expansion of the use which violated their CUP conditions of approval. On June 19, 2008, the zoning administrator revokes the conditional use permit. Months later, in October of 2008, the appellant refiled a CUP for the on-site sales, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages within Unit A. At this moment, I would like to approach the bench and just go over some of the plans that have been provided.
I'm not sure we're a bench, but you can certainly approach.
He's well trained.
Members of the Commission, this subject property is located on a corner lot on Chevy Chase Drive and Adams. It is a multi-tenant building structure consisting of 26 parking spaces. The project location is located here. A floor plan has been provided, location map, pictures of the exterior and interior are also submitted. On to staff's analysis of this appeal. The tenant space consisting the existing restaurant was previously approved for two separate businesses, a deli pizza shop and a coffee tobacco shop. The appellant has since then removed a common wall and combined the two tenant spaces into one establishment, which is a full-service restaurant. The zoning administrator evaluated traffic circulation and concluded that the subject property did not appear to contain sufficient amount of parking spaces on-site and parking availability off-site to contain a large crowd that may congregate at late hours of this operation. The subject tenant space, Suite A, is 1,935 square feet. A full-service restaurant of this size would have an occupancy load of up to 140 people according to the city's Building and Safety Department. Staff believes that the use of this size would generate more vehicular traffic than the 26 parking spaces could accommodate, let alone providing spaces for the other four uses on site. Staff also believes that the intensification of this use with consumption of alcoholic beverages will increase the establishment's popularity and create a conflict with other similar establishments and may also impact the nearby residential uses. Staff believes that this is a reasonable concern. The appellant will argue that the zoning administrator did not take into consideration that the application was exempted from the California Environmental Quality Act, which is known as CEQA. Typically, a conditional use permit application for on-sale, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages is exempt from CEQA. Given the past history of the neighborhood impacts at this establishment, the zoning administrator chose to make a conservative decision to protect the neighborhood. Currently, existing uses have complementary hours. There are many necessary and convenient similar establishments in this area. Staff believes there was no compelling reason to add one more establishment given the amount of neighborhood opposition. Several communications were received in opposition to this proposed application. The zoning administrator found that the appellant failed to address health and safety measures to assure compatibility and neglected to provide any mitigation measures at the public hearing to address the anticipated neighborhood concerns. Staff recommendation is as follows: that the Planning Commission sustain the zoning administrator's denial of the conditional use permit, case number PCUP 2008-043, based on the rationale used by the zoning administrator. The applicant, zoning administrator are all here. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this moment.
Initial questions of staff.
Nothing right now.
All right, seeing none at this moment, so we'll proceed with the appellant slash applicant portion of the hearing. Mr. Premium, you're on. And let me just remark for a second. Procedurally, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Garcia, you'll have 15 minutes. There really isn't an organized appellant per se, since you're the applicant. You'll have your 15 minutes. We'll have public comment. We'll have anything else from staff. You'll have a rebuttal period. We may have some closing comments from staff, and then we'll enter into conversation and deliberation. So that's just for everyone in the room. Right on? Right on. All right. Please begin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Good evening. Shorik Yepremian, Yepremian Consulting. I'm here this evening representing Mr. Henry Kazarian, who's the business owner of the proposed restaurant. I was retained by him several months back. I would like to go on record to indicate that I was not the original applicant on this conditional use permit application or any previous applications that were filed for this location. During the last several months, I have worked with staff, Mr. Reza, as well as the zoning administrator. I have worked with the business owner, as well as Michael Tehan, who lives in Adams Hills Neighborhood Association, to find out some of the issues that were presented at the last several hearings in regards to this restaurant. As you know, the zoning administrator heard this case and denied the conditional use permit because she could not make the three findings, B, C, D, as well as finding number E, which is an additional finding required for CUP conditional use permit application, specifically for alcoholic beverage service. I have reviewed the case file in detail and responded accordingly. As part of the appeal application, I have provided several exhibits. I will go over those in a moment. I have also additional exhibits to submit this evening. I would like to go over some of the questions that were in the appeal application. Number one question was if we contend that there was a violation of law, which forms the basis of this appeal. And we did indicate, and you should have a copy of this in front of you, that the zoning administrator in finding number B determined that the proposed restaurant use will be detrimental to the public health or safety, the general welfare, or the environment by assuming that the site appears to have limited on-site parking provision, and the intensification of the use may trigger noise and parking problems. Furthermore, in finding number C, the zoning administrator indicated that the site does not appear to have sufficient on-site and off-site parking to handle and support a big crowd at one time. Similar arguments were also made under finding D and E. We believe that these statements are contrary to the zoning code section 30.32.050, where the code clearly provides parking requirements and makes parking provisions for specific uses such as retail or restaurants, in general. The project site provides 26 parking spaces for the existing 6,744 square foot shopping center. The city had determined that the existing retail and restaurant uses all meet the zoning code required number of parking spaces. Therefore, we believe the zoning administrator's determination that the proposed restaurant creates parking deficiency is unfounded. There is no record in your file that indicates that there is a parking problem. Furthermore, the conditional use permit application is filed for the purpose of selling and serving alcoholic beverages, and not whether this space should be a restaurant or not. B, do you contend that the board, commission, or officer exceeded its authority by virtue of any of the provisions of law given in answer number 1? And we do believe that the answer is yes. The zoning administrator in findings B and C did exceed her authority in making a determination that the service of alcoholic beverage in conjunction with the full-service restaurant will increase the noise level and the parking demand. Furthermore, she stated that a full-service restaurant impacts the immediate neighborhood rather than previous uses, which was a small-scale establishment. We believe she exceeded her authority in that the conditional use permit application is for the purpose of selling and serving alcoholic beverages and not for the existing restaurant business. Again, Section 30.12.020 allows full-service restaurant uses in C1 neighborhood commercial zones. Number C, do you contend that the board, commission, or officer failed to fulfill a mandatory duty by any provision of law given in answer 1? Again, we say yes. The duty of the zoning administrator is to review and make determination on applications that are filed under a specific provision of the law. Code Section 30.12.020 allows full-service restaurant uses in C1 neighborhood commercial zone and requires the approval of a CUP for selling and service of alcoholic beverages. Findings number B and C, and furthermore D and E, focus on the restaurant use, parking, and noise level rather than the impact of alcoholic beverage service. Furthermore, there were no specific comments. If you look at your file, there were no specific comments from traffic or transportation or police to indicate that the existing restaurant use is problematic or the proposed alcohol service will trigger additional parking demand, increased level of noise, or crime in the neighborhood. There were absolutely no comments in the record. In working with the business owner, I have tried to mitigate some of the concerns from the neighbors, and I have provided photos where, number 1, when I visited the site in January, I saw that there were some gray or beige materials covered on the windows. I suggested to the business owner that he should remove that, and he did that. I have photos of before and after. I had also suggested to the business owner to remove this black or dark gray material that he installed to buffer noise. He also did remove that. I suggested to him that perhaps he can post his hours of operation as well as a menu sample on the window. That way it's clear to the neighbors that his business is open to the neighborhood, that his hours of operation are from 11 o'clock, for example, until 10 or 11 at night. Because in my discussions with Mr. Tehan, there were some concerns about visibility. Are they really operating a restaurant? Are they a nightclub? Is it a banquet hall? Yes, in the past, the record shows that they tried to convert this place to a banquet hall, but that's no longer the case. The new application that you have in front of you is for a full-service restaurant with the conditional use permit to allow service of alcoholic beverages. So I tried to work with city staff, with Mr. Tehan, as well as the business owner to come up with some solutions to any previous concerns that the neighbors had. I had also, when I visited the site at 3 different locations, at 3 different times, one in January, one in February, and one in March, I looked at the parking conditions, since one of the arguments that the zoning administrator had that this restaurant impacts the parking condition on site. On 3 of these occasions, there were not more than 5 to 8 cars. One was on a Sunday. The other 2 visits I had were during the week, and I would like to submit those photos showing the site conditions.
I'm sorry, what time of day was this again?
This was my last visit, I believe. It was during the day, during the week, and the date is posted, but I had
Got
previous...
318 on here.
Right.
And time
So,
of day?
Probably around 11 or 12 o'clock. And I had previous visits, one in January, that was a Sunday, and another one in February. And I would like to also submit a petition that was signed by 3 of the tenants, business tenants in the shopping center. And I would like to also note that the site plan that you have actually does not show the correct separation of the units. There are 5 units total. One is currently vacant, which used to be a market. That's been vacant since my first visit there. That was back in January. There are 2 tenants there at this time in the jewelry store that has a separate address. And we did collect signatures from the business owners who do support the conditional use permit application. What we have also done was prepare a quick questionnaire that was submitted to each of the tenants in the building, asking specific question, and I would like to submit those for the record as well, but I would like to go over the questions. We asked that as a tenant in the shopping center, if they have ever heard any disturbance at Revo Cafe during their business hours, or any disturbance which, in their opinion, was resulted from Revo Cafe. Number 2, that as a tenant in this building, if they have ever heard any incidents resulted from Revo Cafe, or had to call the police department or code enforcement, and the answer to that was no as well.
Could I interject? You're using the Revo Cafe as opposed to Day Revolution?
It's the same, basically.
Well, Revo Cafe was a single space, wasn't it?
Yes, now it's...
I'm just questioning the
Yeah.
wording on the petition versus what you're asking people.
Well, it's the business,
It's your testimony that they understood it was the new
the
facility.
new, correct.
Please continue.
And question number 3, if, in their opinion, if they witness any parking problems, such as parking shortage, not enough parking, or double parking, or any other parking-related issues. Number 4 was if they would like, or if they have eaten at their Revolution or would like to eat at their Revolution. And number 5, if they want to see this business restaurant at this location. And I would like to submit those for the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that basically covers my presentation. I know there are several speakers who would like to come and speak, and if I can have some time later on for rebuttal. If you have any
you will.
questions, I can answer right now or later.
Questions for the speaker at this moment?
Nothing right now.
It's in my stack. What are the current hours of operation? Or current
If I
proposed,
can,
perhaps?
I submitted the list as well to staff, and according to the business owner, the current operation is Tuesday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 11 to 12 a.m. Mondays will be closed.
Okay, and is it currently operating as a restaurant?
As a restaurant, full-service restaurant.
And again, what we're focusing on here is whether they get to serve A&B
Alcohol.
licensed alcohol.
Correct. And I hope you have also a record of all the businesses listed with their hours of operation. I submitted that
It
a
was
while ago.
provided in my packet.
Very good.
Please.
Just out of curiosity, what type of food do you serve?
They serve mixture of, we also submitted a copy of the menu, starting with appetizers, salads, entries, mostly kebabs, Middle Eastern or Russian food.
Now, you combine the 2 spaces to make into full-service restaurant. Is that because of your lack of space in the very first unit? Is that why you expanded to the second unit?
Perhaps the business owner can explain that, the
The
reasons
reason that
behind.
I'm asking that is that I looked at the floor plan. I went by the place, and what I saw, was exactly what's in this picture, and that is that it almost looked like a banquet hall where you had tables and chairs on the side, and in the middle it was a pretty much empty space. When I normally visit full-service restaurants, I expect those spaces to be fully utilized with the tables.
Right.
And so I'm trying to find out what was his intention when he combined into two spaces to make it into full-service restaurant. What was his need for doing that? I mean, that he's paying a lot of money for the space,
Right.
and yet he's not utilizing the space. So I want to find out what was the thought process behind that.
Okay.
I mean, that was his business
Yeah.
decision.
That-
My
that is a
observation
business
is that
decision.
why waste valuable space?
Well, again, these are seats that can be moved around, so whatever way he arranged it, he can perhaps address that in his presentation.
There, in one of the photos, and it's not numbered, well, it's labeled Restaurant Interior, March 2009. It's the bottom photo, and there is something that is gray or white, and I can't make out if that's supposed to be a small stage or if it's like a wrapped table that forms like a head table. Let me show you the specific. Do you know the picture I'm talking about?
Correct, I do
All right.
know.
So we're talking about this photo and that.
Yes,
What is
they,
that?
they do currently have a portable stage. It's not a full stand, it's a stage.
Are
Yes,
they
it's a
allowed to have
portable.
live entertainment as a restaurant?
At this point, they do not have a live entertainment permit.
Okay, so they have a stage with no permit.
Correct.
All
At
right.
one time, they tried to get a live entertainment permit. I believe it was revoked as part of the previous conditional use permit revocation. So at this time, they do not have a live entertainment permit.
All right.
But
Any
they
other-
can file one in the future if they want.
Okay. Any other questions at this moment?
I would, just a clarification, you'd mentioned you went by the restaurant around 11 or so, around midday,
Correct.
and I happened to be around there myself when I visited at approximately the same time, and what struck me as odd was it is open as a full-scale restaurant right now, full-service restaurant, and there were no people in there at lunch, close to lunch, so I just, is that normal? Is that something that, I don't know when you went on 3/18, I went today, and it was the same thing, so just
I
an
believe
observation I
there, when I visited, there was someone outside drinking coffee the time that I visited.
Let me ask and I don't necessarily, I guess, need to know the owner of the facility or of the center. Is the appellant the owner of the center?
No, he's the business owner,
Of the business, he's
not
leasing
the
the space.
property owner, no.
Is any of the people that are currently occupying or signed the petitions the owner of the property?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so they're all leases
Tenants.
as well.
And-
I'm
and-
looking for,
Yeah, and for the record, one space is vacant, which used to be Market. It's been vacant at least the first time when I visited.
Right.
Yeah, still vacant.
Okay, that's all I had. Because of the large number of speakers, during rebuttal time, and just because the questions will come up, we may not be strictly rebuttal. We may have some things that uncover that we'll introduce. All right.
Very good.
All right, so we'll
Thank you
close
very
your
much.
portion, and we'll begin with the public comment period. The first card I have is Wayne, and I'm sorry, was it Lewis or Zeus? I'm sorry? Wayne Lewis. Okay, it's your turn to speak, sir.
Chairman Kane, did you wish to limit him to 3 minutes, or?
Yes.
Or shorter.
You know,
We
that's
like
always
that.
appreciated,
That
but
sounds
you
good.
have your rights. So
I just
please-
want to say it's a
please don't.
great restaurant. I've been there numerous times. It's never been loud that I know of. Every time I've been there, there's never been a parking problem that I know of, and I've been there probably 17 times. Food's really good, and I don't know why there's not a crowd, but usually the crowd starts coming in late in the afternoon. guess Russian Armenians don't eat lunch at 12 o'clock. They come in more like 2, 3 and sit and drink coffee and stuff like that. And it's really a downplay. I think the city makes more money having businesses like this in the area that are nice and upscale. You don't have, there's no drugs, there's no kids playing, you know, there's no bands and 18, 19, 20-year-olds. It's not a disco or anything. It's just a nice, mellow restaurant. And they did have people that did come in and talk and sing at the restaurant. I was there for a few of them for birthday parties. And it's a great, I think it's a boost to Glendale. I think by not letting them operate is a dis for the neighborhood. That's all I have to say.
Questions for the speaker? Do you work in Glendale?
No. I come out to Glendale just to go to the restaurant.
I have to ask, you live from your address in Woodland Hills. So you're motivated to come from Woodland Hills to this quaint, this restaurant that you like in Glendale 17 times?
Yes.
There's got to be a continuous draw. Is the food that special? I mean, what resonates with you?
The food really is special. You would have to go there. They make the most outrageous salads you've ever had. And I wasn't a big salad eater. I'm a meat and potatoes guy. And the food, the shish kebab and stuff is outrageous. The chicken is outrageous. You just have to try it. If you go in there once for lunch, you'll see why.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next card is, I love it when people do it for me phonetically. I mean, obviously people understand that I have a problem here. It's a Lynn Thayard. I so appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen and staff and fellow citizens. I live on Adams Hill, and I am here as I came to the original hearing to express my concerns about this particular establishment. Chief among them, of course, is parking. That's the first thing. Parking is very much a problem. There's a small cluster of shops nearby at the intersection of Palmer and Adams, and that's a pretty busy intersection. And facility of this size, to really operate properly does need a large amount of parking. The other thing that concerns me greatly is the library across the street and the park nearby. I don't have children of my own, but I am like an honorary aunt to, two 7-year-old twins and a 9-year-old boy, and we frequent the park and the library, and we like it a great deal, and I'm just concerned about any kind of spillover that might come from an establishment like this that serves alcohol. There's a place for places like this in Glendale, and there are some wonderful places like this in Glendale, but I just have concerns about it being in a neighborhood that's much more largely residential as opposed to commercial, like up on Brand Boulevard. So those are my concerns, and I thank you for listening.
Let me just
Yes.
ask you, it'll probably be
Yes.
repeated. So you're opposed, again, what's in front of us is not whether there's a restaurant, but rather whether they're allowed to serve alcohol.
Yeah, alcohol is definitely an issue.
But you're not opposed to the fact that there's what should be potentially a popular restaurant.
I'm not opposed to potentially a popular restaurant there, though I do have some concerns about this particular establishment because I did visit it with my neighbors after the initial hearing, and I was struck, and this goes back to some of the questions you raised, by the fact that there was open space in the middle. And I've been to many restaurants in Los Angeles, and I've enjoyed eating out for a long time, and it kind of surprised me. I know most restaurateurs try to use as much of their space as possible for tabletop, and I was just kind of surprised by that.
I had a question.
Please.
Surely.
Have you visited it more than once?
I have not.
When you visited, what time of day was it?
It was in the evening. It was not open that evening, though.
It was not open?
No.
So...
How long ago?
It was in December.
Was there hours of operation posted? Do you recall?
I do not recall.
All right.
I don't remember if I saw hours of operations, but the windows were still darkened at that point.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
Not for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card is Michael Sheehan. And this is what was confusing me. Okay, Michael Sheehan. I'm staring at these cards and going, didn't he just fill in a card?
Really efficient if we could do it this way without
I'm going to see if there's any other hands in the audience.
Sheehan.
Yeah, so Tehan before Sheehan in this case. All right, Mr. Tehan.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, of course. My name is Michael Tehan. I'm a resident of Adams Hill. Before you is actual photos of the actual parking place in operation. Now, keep in mind, the application that they've submitted here is no different technically than the application that they were operating under when they were Revo Cafe. What you see is a completely full parking lot at 11 o'clock in the evening with a valet service. The photo on the right is the valet service parking additional cars on the street against city code. In fact, valets were actually sitting in one of the white SUVs listening to the stereo as I walked by. So this is a clear indication of what the actual parking situation is like when this thing is in operation as a full-service restaurant. As you can see, the parking really is not adequate. It does filter out into the neighborhood. In the bottom right photo, the area adjacent to the actual library is always littered. There's a lot of decay. It's a very fragile area. So late-night operations with alcohol service, with things like that, penetrating into the neighborhood, parking on the street, is only going to make those matters worse. So I encourage you to consider that as an issue. So Edith's point about parking being a problem for an alcohol-related establishment late in the evening is pertinent, and it actually is accurate. But you've also heard comments about this being a full-service restaurant, that it's just, that's nothing more than a full-service restaurant. The original application in their testimony before Edith was that they were going to stop service of food at 10 o'clock in the evening and become a nightclub / live music / whatever it was going to be. In the past, it has been a live music venue with lots of cars parked in the evening, mostly for special events, not the kind of traffic that a full-service restaurant would actually have. But additionally, the fact that they want to switch over to this nightclub aspect means that it's not so much a full-service restaurant as it is a full lounge and bar action with live music. So the notion of it being like an actual full-service restaurant isn't at issue. This now becomes a full liquor bar, a full high-impact liquor bar in a residential neighborhood. But additionally, during the event in December when we were invited to come visit the premises, I'm a former restaurant owner. I've been a restaurant owner for 10 years. Lots of awards, great little restaurant. In fact, one of the other members of our board was also a restaurant owner. We had a chance to visit the facilities. The kitchen is not set up as an actual full-service restaurant kitchen. There is no bar to actually put tickets, to actually take orders for servers to pick them up. There is no line. A restaurant kitchen has to have what's called a line, where food is actually prepared, plated, and handed to the servers. It did not exist. And on that one evening in December, when we were given a chance to actually partake in food, all the food was served banquet style. Nothing was actually prepared to order. Everything was pre-made and pulled out of a walk-in cooler and delivered. All the service speaks of banquet hall. So this is either going to be yet another banquet hall, and there's nothing in the provision that guarantees that they won't be, or it's going to be a high-impact, alcohol-related, live music venue operating late in the evening with problematic parking. So there you have it. Yes, we're opposed to the application.
All right. Fair is fair. Does anyone else have a small child that's making noise out in the hallway that wants to go next? All right.
We tried to keep the noise at the other end of the hall.
It was fine. Michael Sheehan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Good evening. My name is Michael Sheehan. I live in Adams Hill. And the first thing that I want to do is to compliment Gabriel and Edith on their responsiveness to the neighborhood and the appeals that we've made to good judgment. And then we found that good judgment, at least in our opinion, had been forthcoming because this conditional use permit, for all of the reasons that you probably heard already while I was doing laps with a 3-year-old, it just makes sense to me that if there's a place where I could grab a breakfast or a lunch or have a light dinner and go in and be served like I would be at Mimi's or Denny's or the Tam O'Shanter even, if it was a restaurant where families and when folks could go, then serving beer and wine would probably be okay, and maybe even having a bar would be okay. But it seems that for our neighborhood, for Adams Hill, that we're a family-oriented bunch of people. We've got a library across the street from the venue. We've got the park, the Adams Hill Mini Park, which you might have heard about the art project that I produced there last September. And we've got an elementary school a block away. So the idea of having, I hate to use pejorative words, but to have carousing going on so close by, and I'm a relatively liberal person, but I just don't think that it's a good idea to have that sort of a venue close by. And all of the other arguments that you've heard and the hard work that staff has done to deny this thing in the first place, I think was good, hard work. And so I would just like to come down in agreement with them and in appreciation of all of their hard work and hope that you'll decide that if this is going to be some kind of a restaurant, it should be a real restaurant. Thank you.
Questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Thank you. Next speaker card is Chris Welch.
Good evening. My name is Chris Welch. I'm a resident of Adams Hill, and I'm also the president of the Adams Hill Homeowners Association, which represents the area immediately to the south and around this area. We definitely do not support the appellant on this, and we would like for you to sustain and uphold Ms. Fuentes' ruling. We feel that the appellant here is really proposing a Trojan horse. All of the evidence supports that they are trying to create a live music, banquet hall style venue. As Michael Tehan indicated, I was the other person who went into the kitchen. You guys probably have larger kitchens or more able kitchens in your own homes. They had one stove with one oven and 6 burners. How can you possibly serve 140 sit-down diners with one stove with one oven? Not possible. So anyway, I just wanted to cover a few little points here. The parking is definitely very much an issue. I would encourage you, please, just do the math. Just take the square footages and calculate what you need to have for a full-service restaurant and retail, and the spaces you have there. They're short at least 12 parking spaces. They needed to provide off-site parking in order to get any kind of support. They never provided any proof that they were going to have any kind of off-site parking. And finally, suitability. Within 1 block of this location, there's a library, which has youth programs, a toddler's park that the city just built, residences who live within, a few hundred feet of the property, an elementary school, okay? And they're proposing to have live music, although they say that they don't have a permit, but they told us originally that they had a permit for live music. So they're proposing to have live music, no food after 10 p.m., but stay open until 2, a full liquor license. That's just, again, Trojan horse, okay? The neighborhood would fully support a full-service restaurant, nice little neighborhood location. Beer and wine even would be okay if we believed that they would really operate a real restaurant. We do not believe that the appellant will do so. So we please ask you respectfully to uphold Ms. Fuentes' decision, and thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Again, seeing none. Next card is Terry Deaver.
Hi, I'm Terry Deaver. Thank you for this opportunity. I've lived in the neighborhood for about 7 years. I'm actually unfamiliar with a lot of the neighbors in the neighborhood association. My husband and I moved here from out of town. And it's interesting because we started going to the coffee shop when it first opened, and it was a really great arm of the neighborhood. We could walk there, we could bring friends there, and it was very open and very inviting. And when they closed, to remodel, we were told by the owners that they were expanding, which we thought was great. The business is doing really well. But when they reopened and we went in, we were really confused, and I think it's being kind of reflected by what I'm hearing here this evening as well, because they said, you can still get coffee here, sure, but they couldn't actually prepare like coffee drinks, lattes, or anything like that. And there was a stage, which is apparently still there. And so the whole vibe was really kind of a nightclub vibe, but they said they were going to be a restaurant. So it was just a very confusing situation for us. So we never actually returned. And, I just want to say that the city has invested a lot of money in that neighborhood. And it's clearly more than just neighboring on a neighborhood. It is actually a gateway into a residential neighborhood, and that's evidenced by the library that's there and by the park that's been mentioned and the festivals that happen in the summer and the street across from that way. So the idea of having alcoholic uses in the neighborhood after dark, it adds to a sense of not feeling safe and not really being a walkable neighborhood anymore. And what I'll say too is that my husband and I actually find ourselves now actually leaving the neighborhood if we want to have a residential kind of neighborhood feel and have some coffee or have a nice dinner or bring friends out. We go to Eagle Rock, we go to Atwater, we go outside of the city of Glendale to spend our money. And I'm sure that's not really what the city intended originally, and I'm sure that's not something that wants to be upheld through this conditional use permit by having alcohol in the neighborhood, because you're basically forcing the neighbors out of the neighborhood to spend their money elsewhere. All right, thank you very much.
Questions? No? Thank you very much. Next card is Margaret Hammond.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Margaret Hammond, and I happen to be a 50-year resident of Adams Hill. I can tell you every house and every store and probably every block on the area. I go up and down many times. And therefore, I am upholding the motion of denial of the conditional use permit per the March 19th by Ms. Fuentes. Any discussion has there been any discussion from the private residents? I didn't hear them saying. There are houses on Adams immediately adjacent to that little restaurant, as they want to call it at this time. Also, there's an apartment house immediately adjacent on Chevy Chase. Was there any word as to what they're going to have to put up with? The density of this area is the highest of any in Glendale, the highest density, okay? This was at the city council. One of the city councilmen has said it several times. We have humongous parking problems already in our area. And where would an overflow park if there's 140 patrons for 26 spaces? You know they're going to park on the streets. And if this revocation were allowed, it would greatly affect the quality of life for the residents, not just adjacent to this establishment, but trying to get through. I saw the results when they were having valet parking on the street. I could not get through. I could not get through on Adams. And I also understood, and somewhere along the line I've had some experience, that alcohol licenses are granted with the approval of the neighbors. If there is an opposition, which we have not thought about, I guess, then it should be thought about. The operation of the hours till 12 o'clock at night, does that mean people will be getting out at 1 o'clock? What about those people living next door? They're working people, little homes, and they want to go to bed on weekends. Do you think they want to be up till 1 and 2 in the morning? I mean, I wouldn't want to be, and I don't think you would want it. You would want this in the middle of your neighborhood and keep you up at night and interfere with your parking. And you saw pictures from the prior gentleman with the 120 East Cypress, and I live on Cypress, and I go up and down the street all the time. The parking is horrendous. We can't even drive through, let alone find parking. I mean, there are fights over who the last parking spot belongs to. And if you add to that, in that area, that's not right. It's not fair to the people that have lived there many, many years, who bought their homes with the idea that it was a quiet neighborhood, residential at that time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hammond. Questions? Seeing none. All right. The next card, I have to admit I'm having trouble reading the last name. I'm going to blame penmanship, but it's Dr. Artin. And please complete the rest of that. You can repeat that at the mic, sir.
Good evening, Chairman Kane and members of the Glendale Planning Commission. I'm a physician retired.
And your name again, sir?
Artin Sagarian.
Thank you.
After 40 years of being a surgeon, I had 5-channel bypass surgery myself. So I retired from medicine, and I'm a practitioner of certified hypnotherapist. I don't intend to hypnotize you for any decision making.
Just ways to watch or anything like that.
I'll spare you with the technicalities of restaurant and parking and all that, but I know the owners of this suspected restaurant or planned restaurant. I've been their boss for about 18, 19 years. Both Henry and Tamara, his wife, and they have been my managers of the 7-8 clinics that I owned in Glendale, Burbank area. They are perfect managers in their jobs, and they are dependable, and their character is impeccable, and I have enjoyed their company for over 18 years. And now that they are opening a new restaurant or whatever it's called, I can trust them because of their character and their efficiency and their professionalism. Thank you very much for your attention, and good luck.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. The next card I have is Patty. I'm going to say it's Silver Sheen, but it might be Silver Sure. And you'll only be allocated 1 minute since you turned your card in.
Hi,
Just letting you know, everybody gets the rules.
it is Patty Silvershirt, and I would just like to address 2 points. I have been affected by the parking. When there was valet parking, they parked in front of my home. I've been on Palmer Avenue for 23 years. I followed them back to Revo because they were the valet parkers, and I did understand that that was illegal to park on the street. I did not give them a permit to do so. Secondly, I did attend, or I went there one evening, excuse me, to have a glass of wine. There was no sign on the door that it was even open. There was no sign on the door of the hours. When I went in and sat down, it was about 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time coughing. I was not offered a menu. Then when I finally asked for a menu, the menu was a banquet menu. Around me, as I was sitting at the table, thank you.
We have
I
a
know I have 1
full-service
minute.
planning staff.
As I was sitting at the table, there was a party. Obviously, a big party was being planned. All the small tables had been pushed together, and so there were tables for 8, 12, 15. There were no single tables. So that's all I would like to say.
Got it all in a minute.
All right.
I have a question for you, actually. When you went there to attempt to be served, how long ago was that?
It was before this original, the appeal came up.
Okay, so some time ago.
Yes.
All right. I'm just curious on that. Thank you.
This year?
In 2009, no.
All right. Thank you very much. The next card I have is Bernard Pullen. Could be Bernard.
Bernard.
Thank you.
Go by all of them. Bernie, short. Good afternoon. My name is Bernard Poulin. I'm a resident, 20-year resident of Glendale. I live on Adams Hill. I bought my home in 1989, and I'm opposed to granting the variance, and so I would like to uphold the past decision not to grant it. And I'm against it mostly the alcohol, serving alcohol in that area. And the other people have mentioned it too, is the library, it's basically a kids' library, although grown-ups go there too. The mini park is playground for little kids, and the school kids, and they're crossing. It's a very, very dangerous intersection when I drive myself through there. Nobody knows whose turn it is to pass through, and if they're drinking alcohol, whether it be early and just a couple of drinks or late with quite a few more drinks, I think there's going to be accidents and bodily harm done to the pedestrians and other cars and vehicles. The school is nearby. That's my main concerns. The restaurant being opened to the later hours is a concern. I think there's a lot of working people, as myself. I work 12 hours a day. I like to go to bed, and I like to eat and go to bed 10, 11 o'clock, and so open till later hours, and having loud people on the streets, I think, would affect the neighborhood. And basically, that's all I have to say right now.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
The next card I have is Ute Baum.
Good evening, Commission and staff, and my name is Ute Baum. I've also lived on Adams Hill for over 30 years. And I think the conditions of the de-revolution are substantially unchanged from what they were before. And I would basically also reject their granting their appeal to undo what Ms. Fuentes determined. I went by there not too long ago, I think the last couple of days, and because I walk a lot. And as far as I'm concerned, the place always, we liked the Revo when it first was a coffee shop. We went there, we tried, we wanted to be a good neighbor and frequent it because we needed a little place like that. But since they've changed, it's always expanded. It's looked like a banquet hall. It tastes like a banquet hall. It smells like a banquet hall. And even now with the windows, even though the windows are uncovered, it still looks like a mini banquet hall. The fact that so many in our neighborhood are concerned about it ought to give you reason to really think about this and reject their appeal. And the thing that really personally affected me, is the little plaza, diminutive as it is. When they were open before, and I wish they would have asked my opinion, when they were open before with liquor being served, and of course the restaurant spills out into their plaza, the Angela Plaza, that little public plaza was trashed with bottles, with cigarette cases, with drink holders, plastic cups, you name it. It was horrible, and I always clean it up. There's now three big trash cans out there, and it was just awful. And I just know that the patrons spill over from that plaza, the outside of the restaurant, into the public plaza. I've even seen balloons up there, and I've asked them, like on a Monday morning when they had a party on Sunday, and I asked them why they were there, and they said, well, we had a permit, which I sort of doubt. And they've sort of taken over that little plaza when they're open, and it's just natural that you wander out there because it's connected together. So I just don't think this type of a restaurant is a good fit for our neighborhood. Thank you.
I see no questions for the speaker. I have no other further cards from the public, so we're going to transition and we'll let city staff have some remarks, and then we'll enter into rebuttal for the applicant.
Mr. Chair, at this time, I'd like to just simply go over the appellant stated that the original application didn't have any comments from the police, and that in fact is true, but they did submit crime statistics that the zoning administrator stated in her decision. I'd like to just read those crime statistics. The crime statistics in Part 1 state that there were 137 crimes, 57% above the citywide average of 87 for the census tract in 2007. That's about what I'd like to add this moment. At this time, I would also like to read into the record some letters of opposition of individuals that were received. That were received.
Thank you.
Michael Sheehan. All of these forthcoming names are in opposition. Michael Sheehan. Mary Baldwin.
Questions for staff at this time? Mr. Sheets.
I would ask, I hope it's relevant. Did you mention, talk about the evolution of this? And what happened after that? They made some changes?
Yes, it was 2 units, Unit A and Unit B. This case was brought to our attention by Neighborhood Services. The owners were cited for illegal construction. They actually demolished a common wall and combined it into 1 unit. That's when the communication was relayed to the zoning administrator, so that Neighborhood Services stated that there has been an expansion of the use, therefore this is a violation of their conditions of approval. After that, it is still remained one unit, Unit A.
So can I get that clarification? So when they removed the wall, they did it without permission from the city?
That's correct. The appellants did come back into the city and pull all legal permits for that afterwards. After the fact, yes.
After the fact?
Yes.
But which you have not, they have not come through the proper channel to get permission
That's
on that.
That's all I have right now.
Any other questions? Just one.
I have one.
Okay, go ahead.
Because the major, argument that the appellant is making refers to parking spaces, and per code, per size of the improvements or the restaurant that's on site, the code is, they comply with the code, but your concern is really with the overflow when the premises is being used for other than what was intended for, and let's say if it goes to the full maximum capacity of 140 people, that that's your concern, and that's what you're stating in your argument here, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, I did have another item relative to that. So the capacity has been identified that in a building of that size, it could reach as much as 140 if it's legal.
That's correct.
And as far as valet parking, is there a standard or a law or a regulation relative to using and using valet service, when it should be used and how it should be used?
Yes, the city has there are two type of, actually, I've confirmed with Traffic and Transportation. If the valet service, if you pull up to a public street, the valet attendant takes your keys and parks it on a city street property, a permit is required. If a customer drives into the private property, the valet takes your keys and parks the car on the private property, a permit is not needed.
A permit for off-site parking.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
There was testimony from the public that the applicants' hours were requested to be 2 in the morning on some nights, I believe that's what I heard. They've also testified as to what their current hours are. Is that a part of what are they asking for in front of us? Clearly, we can condition, but...
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think Ms. Yepremian pointed out that the business owner is here, and I would like to just add that it's true that Ms. Yepremian wasn't involved with the original case, and she has made a lot of changes or concessions with the business owner and the establishment itself. But I wanted to make sure you understand that when we heard the case, none of those changes, or when I heard the case, none of those changes and improvements on the establishment itself had happened. And the same thing that the neighbors are saying are still applicable when I heard the case, that they have not cleared the windows to make it visible from inside to outside or outside to inside. They have not.
When were you last there?
I heard the case last, I think December.
Well, you're saying that they haven't cleared the windows and so on, so based on what date?
The day of the decision letter.
You're going to when you made your decision.
Right.
Thank you. I
Up
just wanted
to
clarify.
February 2009, when I denied the decision, none of those changes physically have happened on the site.
I wanted to clarify because you seemed like you were talking contemporarily, and you were actually talking about the date you made your decision.
That's my point, is what they're presenting to you today is a different setup as far as the establishment is concerned than when I heard the case. So.
And the difference in setup, will you summarize that, please?
They have The dark windows, which most of the neighbors and even the code enforcement officer said you couldn't look inside or look outside, so you couldn't see what was really happening inside. And then as far as hours of operation, we couldn't tell if they were open 6 days or 5 days a week because there's no hours of operation or days of operation, and that was requested to be posted
Like you said, they've taken the window coverings down, and they've put up a sign of hours
of operation.
till 11 or 12 o'clock at night.
Right, and
Change anytime.
And I think the applicant is also requesting now for beer and wine instead of a full distilled spirit type of license or alcoholic beverage.
So that's an important.
So that's a big.
So this is just beer and wine only now.
Right,
they're
it's
asking
beer and
for,
wine.
as opposed to a full
Right.
bar.
And the hours of operation, I think they are also willing to reduce the hours of operation, but you're going to have to ask them that. But from my understanding, from the 2 a.m. was just too much for the establishment, which is close to the residential zone area. And the applicant also talked about parking like it was the main reason for denying the conditional use permit. And I think Mr. Lee hit it by saying it's the over spillage that I was really concerned. Once those 26 parking spaces are filled, then where's the parking going to go? It's going to spill into the neighborhood. And the main reason for the application being detrimental to the public health or safety is I looked at the intensification of the use with the hours of operation being that late. That has changed the small scale or low scale type of business into this type of business, and that really gave me a detrimental effect or negative impact that I could look at as far as neighborhood is concerned. And I also just want to mention that the C1 zone is intended for small to low scale service centers or businesses. And as far as the surrounding residential neighborhood is concerned, my decision or determination was based on maintaining the safety and general welfare and being compatible with the surrounding residential uses or neighborhood. And I wasn't presented with enough restrictions or buffering techniques to incorporate the new business or the intensified business within the area. So that's one of the reasons I thought it was really going to be detrimental to the neighborhood.
I do have a question.
Please.
It's relative to your last statements, and I also feel that even though the application was for the serving of alcohol, the issue is larger than that relative to the amount of people that might be there relative to using alcohol and what the impact would be. So I see that. And in visiting the site, I noticed there are 24 spaces. 3 of them are marked reserved. I don't know who makes that determination, and I don't know if that negates the spaces being available. But so of the 24, 3 are reserved and 2 additional are handicapped, as I noticed. But I have a question. If they opened a restaurant by itself that could house 140 people, what would the parking be? Do you have any idea on that, or is it 24 or 26?
They'll go on street or within the neighborhood.
I know where they'll go.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, what would be do you know what the requirement is for an establishment, a restaurant, full-service restaurant that has...
Yeah, actually, the zoning code states that if a change of use happens with a square footage under 2,000 square feet, the parking requirement is not enforced. Okay. So they are able to meet the current parking requirement with a grandfathered right.
Okay. That's true. Thank you. That's what I needed to know.
But
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I must say that the parking requirements in the code are minimum parking requirements, so they're not necessarily the parking requirement.
And the exact wording of the findings that you have to make for a conditional use permit is not that code-required parking is met, but adequate parking is met.
Exactly.
Do we have other questions for staff? Nothing if I did. Okay, if they pop up, we can ask them. I'm sorry?
Did you turn in a speaker card?
Who?
The owner, I guess.
You're the owner, Henry. Yeah, you're part of Shogi's presentation. Your time to speak is with her. Now you'll have time during the rebuttal, but that's the deal. You're part of that. You're part of that team. So you'll have time during her rebuttal period, which is about to start. So you can coordinate with her whether she wants you to speak now or later or when. Apparently, it would be slightly later.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, again, Shoik Yepremian Consulting. Again, we are asking the city and this commission to give this business owner a chance. He has invested a lot of money. He did expend, pulled permits. All the concerns that you have, most of the concerns that you had were based on previous conditional use permits that were decided by Ms. Fuentes, later on revoked. They did violate some of the conditions of the previous conditional use permit because they were trying to do banquet. This conditional use permit application, again, is for full-service restaurant. This commission, if approved, can impose strict conditions where they have to comply with those conditions. I have advised my client that he cannot do banquet halls at this location. It is in C1 zoning. He cannot conduct a bar or a nightclub. His restaurant, if he wants to do special parties or private parties, he's limited to the 30% rule. So those are definitely the boundaries or the provisions specified in the C1 zoning. Unfortunately, we, either the city or myself or anyone else, cannot dictate how the interior of the restaurant should look like, how the kitchen should set up. That's strictly a business decision. If he's willing to invest his money to operate a restaurant business at this location, it's a risk he takes. If he doesn't succeed, he doesn't succeed either because of the economy, in general, or because he doesn't know how to run a business. That, again, that's a risk he takes. We are, again, just asking the city for him to have some time to prove to the neighborhood that he can operate this business as a restaurant and as a restaurant only. Again, some of the arguments that Ms. Fuentes raised relates to parking. The business with the remaining of the businesses in the shopping center meets the zoning code requirements. His occupancy permit and his number of seats are 56, according to what he told me just now, and not 140. 140 is perhaps the maximum he can have when he perhaps, if he has a banquet, for example, but that's not what he can do. That's not what he intends to do. He has 56 seats at this location. Your record and what I have reviewed the file does not indicate anything from traffic or transportation or police that there are any parking problems at this location. So we do respectfully ask that this commission grants this conditional use permit for this business to operate as a full-service restaurant with the service of alcoholic beverages. The hours of operation I have highlighted, again, Tuesday through Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Of course, if this commission wants to grant him more hours, you can. Friday through Sunday, 11 a.m. until 12 midnight. And that concludes my presentation, and hopefully you can grant a conditional use permit application. Normally it's for 3 years. Perhaps you can give him a year or two to try to see if he can succeed in his operation. There's always code enforcement. If he violates any of the conditions attached, again, he'll be here or in front of the zoning administrator for revocation. But he's willing to approach this application in a good faith, and he knows what his limitations are, and he's willing to abide by the law. Thank you very much, and that concludes my...
We definitely have questions. I've seen hands waving. Mr. Lee?
Just on your hours operation, so you're closed Sunday and Monday?
No, they're closed Mondays.
Okay.
Friday, Saturday, Sundays, 11 a.m. to 12 midnight.
Now, the hours operation obviously is voluntary, that you have limited to 11 to also, and on weekends at 12 o'clock. If there are further limitations or restrictions on the hours operation, is that something that your client could go voluntarily go with that?
Perhaps it depends. Again, as a full-service restaurant, there are no hours of operation. The reason we're here discussing hours of operation is because of the conditional use permit, and normally there are limitations on the hours of operation, and we would leave that up to your discretion at this time.
Mr. Sheets?
Yeah, first, I think we went through this. They're open now as a full-service restaurant?
Correct.
And are they serving alcohol right now?
Not at this time. As far as, they're not allowed to.
Right.
Let me go on record. They don't have a conditional use permit to serve alcohol.
Okay, and do they use valet service?
They do not have valet service at this time. Perhaps in the previous conditional use permit, when they violated the conditions, I'm not aware of that. That's when maybe some of the photos the neighbors have showed.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Recognizing that you're an expert in planning and not necessarily an expert in restaurant kitchens, how do you respond to the comments from a couple former or present restaurateurs over the inadequacy of the kitchen to support what the position of being a full-service restaurant is?
Again, this is establishment that's going to serve food. The manager of the business or the business owner can best determine the type of decor he can have or the type of kitchen he can have. Again, that's not up to me to make comments. I try to work with him on some of the issues that the neighbors raised in terms of visibility. They didn't know what the hours of operation were, so I tried to work with him on try to mitigate some of those concerns. But again, going inside the kitchen and checking everything out, that's not what I should be doing.
I appreciate that, and clearly some of the things you've suggested to your client are huge steps in the right direction. But part of it is if there is a lack of infrastructure to be able to provide the things that you expect out of a full-service restaurant, such as an adequate kitchen, adequate seating, whatever it happens to be, we have to weigh those type of things and say, what's going on here. So
I would like
I
to-
welcome Mr. Kazarian's comments on that when he's speaking.
I would like to point out that when they expanded, they did obtain building permits, so there was full inspection from our building department, health department to determine
Well, that's
minimum
great. We know it's a safe
requirements
kitchen. We know it's a safe kitchen. My kitchen's safe, but I can't serve 60 people at home. So I'm really anxious to hear, and we'll allow Mr. Kazarian to speak, of course, because he's entitled. But I'm really troubled by that, and I'm telegraphing that in terms of our conversation when we speak up here as a board. Are there any other questions at this moment for Ms. Upremian?
I guess, going back to that original question, you said, it's really, up to the owner how he arranges his, dining hall and how he arranges kitchen, and it's really whether he makes it as a full restaurant is really his risk. But, the question was asked, and I'm curious as to, the arrangement of the floor, how it was arranged. And I don't think it was it was answered, it was addressed, so
And
maybe...
he
yeah,
can perhaps,
maybe, yeah.
yes, okay.
All right.
Mr. Chair, perhaps he can say a few words and address some of the...
I will allow that, yes, of course. Mr. Kazarian?
Mr. King, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Henry Kazarian, business owners of Revo Cafe. What I'm going to talk until end of November 2007, because after that, when our
Excuse
me,
will you please
sir,
speak into the
sir,
mic?
I'm sorry.
I appreciate you trying to address everyone, but
Yeah,
we need to pick it up.
When our partnerships little bit, change, and my partners would like to change what we do before and go to, let's say, no banquet hall, but looks like banquet hall. And that time I stopped my activity there. That's why if we're going to talk about Revo Jazz Cafe until end of November 2007, I can answer any question. After that, when my partner starting work, actually one of the partners been my wife, and after that we have some family problem also because we doesn't understand each other. And when they change all things what I put there, of course there have been too many problems with parking, with other things, and I understand if city is coming and close the business. It's okay. I understand that. Everything's right. But now we are talking about new business. We're going until November 2007. What I want to do, I want to do same thing what we're doing until end of November 2007. That's all my target. That's what I want to do. Couple times I hear from a former restaurant owner here if he talking about kitchen. First, I would like to understand from where we get this number, 140 people. I can understand. We never even think about this 140 people because we have small place. It's I don't think so. More than 60 or 70 people can go inside. That's why our kitchen is perfect kitchen. We buy very good equipment, and everybody is happy with us. Even Mr. Wynn coming from Woodland Hills, he has a mistake, not 17 times. He come more than 20 times. And he's coming not only for food, he coming for our entertainment, what we do until November 2007. And it's not only my word. I'm sorry. I take only one newspaper, but it's bunch of them. Los Angeles Times, now I have what is this? Burbank. We have here. This all about us. This all article. This all about us. It's all articles. What we do before November 2007. Okay? And it's only one newspaper. If you like to go, even if you go to my name, Henry Kazarian.
It's ours now, isn't it?
In Google, and you can find too many things about Revo Cafe. What I want to ask you, if you give us one more chance to do what we do before November 2007, it's going to be great. Because now, if you're going checking this Adams Square, it's dead because we are not there. All business is dead because we are not there. And I don't understand if we are talking about parking. If we are not working more than 1 year, what are we talking about? And one more time, I agree with you. After end of November 2007, there were too many mistakes with the parking, with the people, too many people's banquet. I agree. That's why we get too many problems, financial problems. We are close, and I'm paying 1 year's this rent because the people every time asking me, can we do same thing what we do before? Good place for the people. It's not only for Armenian. It's African American come there, Spanish-speaking people come there, Chinese people come there. It's good, big community for Glendale, you know. That was my target. If everybody's in our community, Glendale community, come there and spend good time there and be friend, even from Woodland Hills. It is not only Mr. Wing coming from Woodland Hills. Too many people's coming from all other cities. That's all what I want to tell you. If you give us one more chance, I'm going to really appreciate it.
Mr. Kazarian,
Yes.
unfortunately, because of the rules of that newspaper now needs to be turned over to staff, because it was sort of your evidence, if you will.
Yes. Actually,
But it appears
if
you
you
have
like
other
to find
copies.
this Los Angeles Times, Glendale News,
If
too many
you wouldn't
things.
mind handing that to him. I imagine we have some questions for you, I'm suspecting. Questions for this speaker?
I don't have it.
So when you say, you know, you want to go back to 2007, when, you know, it seems like the Adams Hill residents were, you know, patronizing your facilities for coffee and for, you know, as a eating place, and did not have this issue that they have now. And I guess that's what you're referring to, so going back to Rebel Cafe, I guess, is what your old establishment was. So is it correct that, am I hearing you correct by saying you want to convert your facility now to a family-friendly restaurant?
With live music.
With live music.
Yes, it's very important things, entertainment, because everybody knows if we are there changing, every week we're changing the music there, and everybody knows. Everybody waiting for us. Of course, we have a good kitchen, we have a good cook, but the first things is entertainment.
And then, you know, concern of the neighbor. And I drove around their area. It is a primarily residential area, and it is it's a very nice neighborhood, and the commercial properties is very limited in that couple of blocks there. So it is a family-oriented setting there. Now, the concern with the residents is that your after hours, when they are ready to go to sleep, that your facility is open during those times. Now, I think if I understand it correctly, as of right now, after 10 o'clock, you don't serve food. Okay, family restaurants. If you're going to stop serving food after 10 o'clock, and I'm not sure if residents, I'm just speaking this out. If they request you become the family restaurant and you close your facility down, your restaurant down at 10 o'clock, as you're serving your food stops at that time, is that something you're open to?
Yes. Before I answer your question, may I ask everybody's here, our neighbor, if they have any problem until end of November 2007?
We really can't have you do something like that. That's kind of, because
Okay.
now all of a sudden
I'm
we're
sorry,
surveying people and.
That's why I'm trying to tell you.
But
I
that's-
can answer all your questions until November 2000 because I've been responsible for that. After that, I explain you. I have a problem with my partners and my wife. Now,
If you're telling us you have a problem with your wife, that's a whole different.
Let's not go there.
Because she been my partner. Now she understands what's going on, all our mistakes, what they do, But the people in Glendale, they're asking me every time, you going to open this place again?
Do you have the same partner? Do you have the same partners now?
No. Actually, I'm going to, it's going to be my decision now.
Do you have the same partners? Are they involved in
no.
Are they owning this
Only my
business?
wife.
Okay.
Yeah, but she's going to stay in home. Yes, sorry.
Oh, there was a question about what hours of.
Yeah.
So.
Also, same thing. We working until end of November, until around 12 o'clock. But we stopping music around 11:15, something like this. Of course, the kitchen the kitchen close around 10 o'clock. It's like usually like everywhere, same thing, Nothing special. Of course, if you're going to banquet, you're going to stay until 2 or 3 a.m. Yeah, because it's party. They want to stay. But we are a restaurant with live music. If we stop music because we have a rules, we stop music. Nobody can tell us nothing. No customers can tell we're going to stay until 2 o'clock because it's not banquet hall, it's restaurant with his rules. And you can see the business hours on the window. That's it. Everything's going to by rules.
Other questions? Mr. Ferguson, I think you had something? Didn't you have a question for the speaker? I thought you did. I'm mistaken.
I at one time did, but he answered it subsequently.
All right.
Thank you.
I think that's fine for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I have no other speaker cards. I'd like to see if staff has any closing comments. I actually have a question or two for staff.
I'd be happy to answer that question.
Okay. And I've lost it.
I did have one parking question while you're thinking about it.
Okay.
The signs that are on the parking lot now say 30-minute limit. Is that something that the ownership did, or is there a reason for that? Because right now it's a limited 30-minute
I think
parking.
they just did that on their own.
I'm not familiar.
Who's the they? Is it all
The
the
owner
businesses?
and
or
the businesses around it. Yeah. Unless it says Glendale Municipal Code section that that means
didn't
the
look
city
that closely at
the city imposed it. Otherwise, if it's just their own 30-minute parking regulation, then the owner of the property must have done that to limit.
Because my concern that although it's not immediately adjacent, but at the other end of the square where the library and the legal center is, that parking area is policed.
That's correct.
So I had difficulty with that issue, knowing there were other businesses and uses there, but nobody could park there. I would hope that would never happen here, that somebody, because I don't know who the who are that would post that sign or who's in charge of the parking, but you've answered my question. I don't know enough about whether it was posted by the city.
We can check on those.
Mr. Lee.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Edith, because one of the statements you made was your concern about the intensification of the use, and I think one of the things that the appellant was referring to was the number 140. So can I elaborate on that a little bit more, because they're claiming that they're.
I could do that. A senior plans examiner of the Building and Safety Department reviewed the plan that was submitted by the applicant. Based off that plan, I'm not sure if the floor plan has changed currently, but that plan is determined an occupancy load of 140 people.
Which is, I think it was 1935 square foot, right?
Yes, close to, yes.
One of the things that's been noted in the report was the high incidence of crime in the neighborhood. Now, that high crime, has really nothing to do with the current operation. You're worried about intensification. So my question is, what is the planning department doing about this high crime area? Are you starting to withdraw liquor licenses on everyone that's coming up for withdrawal? Because what you've done is link the higher number of liquor licenses to the crime. So if you're going to link that, then clearly we need a solution.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, let me address that. Under letter E, findings 1 and 2, I was able to find that it is not going to impact
So what you're citing the report, but saying it doesn't impact your decision.
Exactly.
All right.
And then 3, 4, and 5 are the other findings that I said 3 of the 5 criteria set forth in this section have not been met, and there were a lack of consideration. So 3, 4, and 5 are the 3 criteria
All right, thank you for anticipating the objection.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions for any of the speakers or staff at this time? Because I'm prepared to close the public hearing and enter into deliberations. All right, the public hearing's closed. We'll move into deliberations. Mr. Lee, you can relax, since you participated in the first hearing.
Okay.
By going first. Very good. Please.
Well, my initial thoughts when I started hearing this case, the situation was, we've got 40-something banquet halls in Glendale, and we got one Rafi's Place. And I would really rather see 20 Rafi's Places than 20 banquet halls. A full-service restaurant in a neighborhood that served beer and wine is incidental to coming in and having a meal is much less of a red flag in my mind in close proximity to a neighborhood. On the other hand, the serving of alcohol incidental to music and jazz entertainment usually, to me, means much less food consumed and much more alcohol consumed, and the proximity of this to the residential neighborhood and the library and so forth and so on is a great concern to me. I have a friend who, my ears kind of perked up when I heard about the Revo being a jazz club, because I have a good friend at work who plays for the jazz group, and on a very regular basis in Sierra Madre, there's a wonderful little jazz place where they have live music, and all they serve is coffee. And they stay open until 10 o'clock. Usually they start at 8, entertainment's over by 10 or 10:30, and it's in a proximity to a residential neighborhood, maybe within a block. And they do a fine business just serving coffee. And I'm not suggesting that that's a reason for denying an alcohol permit, but on the other hand, with so much neighborhood opposition right now, I'm finding it difficult to see a way to reverse the zoning administrator's findings. And it would be a suggestion that the business take the same business model as the Jazz Club in Sierra Madre and try it out for a while with coffee, gain the trust of the neighborhood, and then if everything's under control and there's no parking issues and everything, then come in and apply for a beer and wine permit at that point, and there'd be less opposition. The 12 by 30 kitchen, it's interesting. I'm thinking about, I stand there and look into the kitchen in Rafi's Place all the time when I'm getting food, and it's a lot larger than the 12 by 30 here. I'm not saying that you can't do a good job with the 12 by 30 kitchen, but the combination of the 12 by 30 kitchen and the arrangement of the tables as if it was a banquet hall and all these things, all the sins committed between 2007 and 2009 are just causing a great deal of neighborhood concern and opposition to this, and it's almost like you got to gain the trust of the neighborhood before I would feel comfortable serving beer and wine. And I was going to say the 12 by 30, just for reference, 12 feet's about as wide just from here, from the wall to the front of this dais, and about as long as the front here. That seems like a fairly small kitchen for serving. So that's just another thing that goes to the trust issue. That's my opinion.
Mr. Sheets, would you like to continue?
Okay, I think there are a lot of valid concerns about granting this license or this CUP. A couple of those things that I've noted here through the discussion came to mind that in the evolution of from the original business to where it is now. There were some steps that were taken kind of around the legal process. Another thing that I noted out there, it's complete, the restaurant, which is now opening up as a larger restaurant, is surrounded by residential. The business is in Adams Square. Having lived here around this city as long as, at least in Glendale, similar to what Margaret mentioned, we used to drive through Adams Square a lot, and there are a lot of issues about what was there and what is there now. And having been involved in the Edison Pacific area and all the changes and evolution that occurred there, I know it takes a lot of work. And the people in Adams Square went to a great deal of effort with everybody getting involved, volunteering a lot of hours to try to make changes that I personally believe were for the good. It looks a lot better. A lot of things have been improved. It seems to me the original business that opened up was a big part of that, and people liked it and people enjoyed it. Now it's changed. I have trouble separating the issue of CUP for serving alcohol and the residual impact that will occur.
Man's Inhumanity to Man, Journey Out of Darkness, is the theme of a month-long art exhibit at Brand Library Art.
There wasn't a lot of activity in the restaurant, which seemed unusual to me because I thought at lunchtime there would be, but it sounds like all the activity starts to happen later, which is another point that stuck in my mind. It seems like the activity starts later. The issue of valet parking concerns me. If the restaurant only has a small amount of people and the parking is adequate, why do we need valet parking? I mean, it's 20 feet from the parking lot to the front of the entrance to the restaurant. And to be honest, this is just a personal issue. I'm confused. I don't know if it's going to be a restaurant or a banquet hall. And I don't... But in my mind, in seeing the evidence and seeing the item that was presented by Mr. Tihan as far as the parking, having the evidence that people are having valet parking in front of their house, whether that happened before 1107 or after, the evolution to me, I go back to where I started. The evolution to me seems like there were some steps taken, some activities that occurred that maybe were done without following the right channels. So all of that together, if it makes sense to anybody here, concerns me that there is potential that the area will be impacted. There will be noise issues, there will be safety issues, which are directly related to the use of alcohol later into the evening. So those are some concerns I have about granting this permit, and now I'm leaning towards staying with the original decision.
Thank you, Mr. Sheets. Mr. Lee?
One of the things I look for in this appeal process is whether or not ZA has missed something, has misinterpreted some of the things that she found that will present itself as evidence for us to consider. In this case, her statements concerning this case, I did not find anything that did not make present the evidences that will think otherwise. I think she has considered all the points, and then she, I think, truly believes there's a intensification of the use potential, intensification of the use here. And as a personal, I'm a businessman, and if I'm selling some products or service in that location, and I like to rely on the customers that comes from that local area, and what I see here is that, you're not getting any support from that area. And Pelland has indicated that he wants to go back to 2007. But the problem is that in 2007, that was before he knocked down the wall and made the place into a larger place. So I don't think he can go back to that times where he was serving the customers and maybe there was some with the local area residents some harmony there, some some of the favorable times in 2007. But he has taken the steps, whether it was through his partners, whatever. The area is now 1925 square foot, and it has the potential to become a banquet. How do we control that? I don't think we have any measures to control that. Certainly the potential is there. And I do have a hard time also, along with other commissioners, reversing the original GA's decision on this. I think her arguments and her findings are all valid. And there is, I know you made a statement here that, she did not do her job, and, she was, I think, some strong words here, violated law, and I do not find that to be so. So I'd like to hold, with all these, her decision not to grant your CUP.
All right, thank you. Well, first off, I truly consider Mr. Kazarian to be a sincere individual. I saw the way you spoke, and in terms of my judging your character, I believe your words were sincere and heartfelt. And I also commend you for hiring, I'm not advertising for a shogi, but I strongly am glad that you hired her, because the advice she's given you has shifted a very poor application, one that was easily denied by the zoning administrator, to something where there's an opening, where there's a conversation, where it shows some real effort to address, what before was just a horrible idea. However, and I don't know all the intricacies of who was partners and who was the operating partner and who made decisions. The problem is that over the last couple of years, whoever was running that facility and the decisions they made, between the illegal construction, between the valet issues, between the entertainment, between all the other little things that happen, both large and small, that have both united the local community in opposition as well as the planning staff in opposition, they effectively salted the earth for you. If someone had come in, and this is a hypothetical situation, but if someone had come in and they were going to start a restaurant, or they had had a small restaurant going, and they had demonstrated that they were a good neighbor, or even if they just indicated that they would be a good neighbor, I think it would be fairly easy to grant a beer and wine license for a 1-year, 2-year period, in terms of, let's say, an experiment where it'll impact the community for a very finite time, and where that person would know that community is really looking over their shoulders, and if he's going to get a return on his investment, he better be a good neighbor for more than 1 or 2 years. I think there would be a way to start that. I think some of the things that Ms. Upremium advised you on and you put in place were great starts. Opening up the glass, that type of thing. We're all troubled up here by the lack of fixed tables, and the fact that it's as sincere as you are, you might conceivably disappear tomorrow. And the next person that comes in may not be as sincere or as forthright as you, and suddenly we're right back where we started from, and that that duck continues to quack and becomes the banquet hall all over again. So unfortunately, because of the incidences that the community has experienced with admittedly people that were partnered with you, even though you may not have been the front person, I don't see any way that I can charge right forward and say, yep, let's give them a beer and wine license. Unfortunately, you need to do some remedial actions, in my opinion, that you still need to continue to do remedial actions with the community. These people supported the coffee house. Maybe it wasn't as financially rewarding as you want, but at least there's been testimony where the community liked having the coffee house. I'm not suggesting you go back to that, but what I am saying is that when you deliver a product that's friendly, that's approachable, I mean, again, I'm just stating for myself probably, but the idea of a jazz club sounds wonderful. It's a you think laid back, you think nice evening. That's all really terrific. But to jump into it based on the recent history, I just can't get there. I mean, I could develop a whole set of draconian conditions and allow you to open, but because of that recent history, I just can't get there. We could talk about hours of operation. We could limit you to 10 o'clock on weekdays and 11 o'clock on Fridays and Saturdays and 9 o'clock on Sunday. And you could really push down on your hours of operation. We could demand that you secure the tables in a fixed location. Where you're obviously eliminating the opportunity for dancing, for example. There's a whole series of conditions we could really, and I could be prepared to put down, but as I tip that scale, I can't quite get to the point of putting those conditions in place yet. What I need to suggest that you again can come to us in, is it 6 months?
6 months.
You can come to us in 6 months, and assuming you have the financial wherewithal to carry forward your current operation, I would suggest that you need to, and I suggest to the Adams Hill community that you give this guy a chance, and that if you're going to operate as a restaurant, we've heard testimony, it's great food. Capitalize on that, reach out to the community, demonstrate that that you're the real deal, and let them rebuild their faith in you that they had when you were just the coffee house. And in a 6-month period, if you redouble that and you're getting a sense and you're reaching out to your neighbors, then I think that it's very, very possible, I won't say likely, but very possible that you could come in front of the planning staff and be granted a beer and wine license for a year or 2 years. And again, opening up the threshold in terms of demonstrating that old, terrible operating group no longer exists. And then perhaps shortly after that, maybe it goes to liquor, maybe it doesn't need to, but whatever. So I'm just saying you have a period of remedial action that you're going to need to undertake, at least as far as this commissioner is concerned, before I could entertain granting a beer and wine license, if not a liquor license. So I have no further comments. Anything else from the commission? All right, I would entertain a motion, please.
I'll move that upon review and consideration of all materials and exhibits of the current record relative to conditional use permit 2008-043 located at 1022 East Chevy Chase, and after having conducted an appeal hearing on said matter, that the Planning Commission hereby sustains the zoning administrator's decision and denies the conditional use permit in accord with the findings set forth in a decision letter of February 3rd, 2009.
Second.
I have a motion and support. Please call roll.
Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets.
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson.
Aye.
Chairperson Kate.
Aye. On a 4-0 vote, conditional use permit case PCUP 2008-043, the zoning administrator's decision has been sustained. And in this case, I need to paraphrase, anyone not happy with it has 10 days to appeal to the planning department on this floor. Do you need a 2 or 3 minute break, anyone?
I think that would be helpful.
We're going to go to recess for approximately 3 minutes.
Laura?
If for no other reason.
Laura? 10 days.
There's someone interested in it, so I think you can pick one.
I only have one card, I believe.
He has a concern.
Okay.
I don't know that he's...
You're just enjoying the scenery?
Extra ones right now. But it's...
I really just want to hear the whole thing.
Well, do you want to speak? If you don't want to speak,
I'll listen to theirs.
so you want to have it prepared. That's the way to do it.
Okay, I think we're on. It looks like we're on.
We're on, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, we're back from recess. Some of us were back sooner
Except for
than...
Mr. Lee.
Some of us, yeah, great, we've reached that point of the evening. Some of us were back sooner than others in terms of mentally. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 8A. It's new business. We'll actually be acting on Special Recreation Development Review, PSR number 2009-001. It's 10041 Shirley Jean Street, and it's an application for the construction of a cul-de-sac at the end of Shirley Jean Street and an approximately 5-foot-high retaining wall to assist in the construction of the cul-de-sac in an area located in the SR, which is the Special Recreation Zone. Land required to accommodate the cul-de-sac, currently located on private property, will be dedicated to the city. The applicant is Frank Warman. The recommendation is to allow the construction of the cul-de-sac and retaining walls. And Roger Keisel is on board for staff. Opening remarks, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. The next item, the last item before you this evening is an SR Special Recreation Zone Development Plan Review, which is proposing to construct a cul-de-sac at the end of Shirley Jean Street and approximately 5-foot-high retaining walls to assist in the construction of this cul-de-sac in the SR zone. As you may recall, development plans that are proposed in the SR zone must be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission. The project site is located at 1041 Shirley Jean Street, and the plans, photos, and maps are behind you. Camp Max Strauss, on which the project is located, sits on an approximately 112-acre property at the terminus of Shirley Jean Street. The majority of development is located in the eastern portion of the site. The Planning Commission has granted a number of approvals recently for the site, including a music art building, 2 cabins, a pool house, an infirmary, and a dining room addition. The current project involves the construction of a cul-de-sac at the entrance of Camp Max Strauss at the western terminus of Shirley Jean Street, and retaining walls to assist in the construction of the street. The cul-de-sac will be built to city standards and improved with a 35-foot turning radius and curb and gutter. The land on which the cul-de-sac is proposed is currently private property and will be dedicated to the city after improvements are complete. Because of the current topography of the site, retaining walls will be required to accommodate the cul-de-sac. The proposed retaining walls will be located adjacent to the western portion of the cul-de-sac and the 2 existing driveways, and those driveway locations are not going to change as a result of the project. The walls will be up to approximately 5 feet in height and constructed of slump stone to match the material and colors of the retaining walls to the neighboring properties, and there's actually a picture of that as well. Camp Max Strauss is proposing these improvements at this time because it has funding that will expire soon to complete the work, and it would like to complete the improvements prior to the opening of the camp in early June. Additionally, the city has requested that prior to considering any further projects at the camp, that the cul-de-sac improvements must be completed. The location of the proposed project is near Blue Line Stream that is protected. Section 1604-037 of the Glendale Municipal Code prohibits construction, grading, engineered slopes, or other man-made features from occurring within 30 feet of the center line of the stream, and allows grading between 30 and 100 feet, provided that any riparian habitat is preserved. The closest point of construction is 38 feet from the stream center line, and the project will not disturb any riparian habitat. as discussed in the staff report, there are a number of trees located within or near the proposed improvements. However, the project will not require the removal of or encroachment upon any of the indigenous trees, oak, sycamore, bay laurel, those sorts of trees. There are 3 large eucalyptus trees that will be encroached upon due to the project, one of which warrants removal due to its poor structure, according to the urban forester. The 2 others should be protected as specified in the tree protection guidelines. And I actually, the pink copies that you have before you are those guidelines. Staff recommends approval of the project given the improvements are appropriate for the area, will better provide for any future expansion of the camp, will ease access to the area for emergency services and other city-provided services, and is consistent with the overall intent of the municipal code. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff?
Nothing.
Okay.
The purpose of this cul-de-sac that the Camp Max Strauss people are wanting to put in, is there a reason they want to put it in other than they just found some money that's going to expire soon, or is there more practical? That's practical enough, I suppose. But.
Yeah. As I mentioned in the staff report, the city has approved a number of smaller projects for the camp, and at some point previously, the city has said, listen, we're not going to entertain any more of these projects until you improve the end of Shirley Jean to city standards.
Okay, so this is kind of a city-inspired
correct, yeah,
improvement of the end of the street, which...
Right, and the applicant can speak better to this, but I think funding in terms of donations or grants or something that the camp has now that will be used to fund these improvements will expire very shortly.
Yeah, that has no bearing on my thoughts. I just was curious.
But that's one reason why they're doing that now. Yeah.
Okay.
We're also serving as the design review board for this project, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's the SR.
Much, but, yeah.
Well, design is one of your overall.
Well, because it's in a special recreation.
Correct. Yeah, you serve as the design review board.
Well, it's shaped like a cul-de-sac. That's a good start.
Good. We've exhausted your expertise in the area. All right. A couple other questions for staff, and/or it may involve the speaker. Beyond the retaining wall, that is readily accessible public space or semi-public space.
It's private property, and the camp owns it. Right now, when I went to the site, I parked in their parking lot and I, walked around there. So it's, I guess it's semi-public space, but it's private property.
They're dedicating and maybe it was in the documents, I missed it. They're dedicating the wall outward to the city.
The wall will be on their private property. From
outside the wall outward.
Correct.
So from the wall inward, it's private property.
Correct.
Okay, that's interesting to know. My question on that then is I'm concerned over the distance and a lack of a guardrail.
Okay.
Any thought, any conversation?
There was.
Reason?
I'm sorry?
Any reason?
Any reason?
It didn't occur to you, it didn't occur to staff?
Yeah, they didn't propose it. It didn't, frankly, occur to us. I know they've worked with Public Works on the project. I don't know whether building safety has not, to my knowledge, looked at that yet.
So it's still subject to, do they require a permit from Building and Safety for this wall?
I think it's because it's retaining, they will need a building permit.
Okay.
The applicant has done a lot of work previously to submitting this, and they may shed some further light on how much Building and Safety has looked at this.
Any other questions for staff at this time? Okay, I have one speaker card. Please. Actually, I have two speaker cards, but the first one we'll talk to is James Couch. Oh, I'm sorry, Frank Borman. I got the wrong card. Frank Borman, my mistake.
Good evening. I'm Frank Borman. I represent the camp. I work for FC Borman Properties, and I am a developer as a volunteer on behalf of the camp. And I'm here to answer all your particular questions. I think the simplest thing is to just go down the list of all the questions that you had and just address them individually. Ultimately, I think I agree with staff. We certainly want to install the cul-de-sac, and so I think it was a great decision by staff to support this.
All right, let's start.
The first question is, why do you want to do the cul-de-sac now, specifically? As was mentioned by staff, there is nothing impeding in the camp right now. There have been historic jobs that have been done in the camp. The city at one point in time said, we'd like you to install a cul-de-sac. Never got done. So as a condition of future work, they want this to be installed. There is no immediate plans that the camp is expecting to submit in the foreseeable year or so that would be the motivation for this installation. It's nothing more than we know it's going to be an obligation in the future. Let's get this over with. Essentially, it's as simple as that.
Construction's cheap now. We've got the money. Let's proceed.
We didn't know it was going to be. We've been working on this for over a year and a half, if you can believe it, unfortunately. So it wasn't a function of cheap construction. It's nothing more than a function of the camp mentally can't start thinking about what they'd like to do with the camp in the future without just getting this done. And because I'm a developer by trade, and I'm involved with the camp, they said, can you just spearhead this and get it done? As we went through the process, funds became available. The issue on the funds that are available is that they're time sensitive. So that's why we want to get this done and approved today so that we can get this done by this calendar year. The funds that were obtained during this process are time sensitive. That's the reason we would like to get the approval tonight. As far as why we're doing it, it's a city requirement. They put the condition upon us, truthfully. It's expected to cost upwards of $300,000 to install this cul-de-sac, and each kid costs about $1,200 to go to the camp, which would be 250 campers who would be able to go to the camp this summer if we didn't have to install this work to put things in perspective. But we understand it's a requirement. We're happy to do that. But obviously getting donated funds makes it much easier for the camp to absorb the cost. As far as the area behind the wall, is it public or private space? It is completely private space. It's not policed at all, and so the camp has never had a problem with individuals taking dogs or going on walks in the private area. Occasionally people do park in their parking lot area, but it is private space, but it is not policed regularly, and there's never been an issue. So the camp obviously always retains the right to police it if there was ever a problem. Will the wall be private property? As mentioned by staff, it is on private property. There will be what is called an L footing for the retaining wall, so that none of the wall whatsoever will be on public property. And as far as a possible guardrail, the issue had never formally come up. The way that the walls are installed is that you're required to have I think it's about a foot lip from where we'll say the dirt or the grass ends and the top of the wall. We would be more than willing to entertain the installation of a guardrail if required. Candidly, individuals don't tend to hang around this area of the camp, but certainly as we go through the installation process, we could certainly budget in that, but we would request that it be looked at after the possible installation just to see whether or not it's aesthetically it's necessary for a safety reason, and then ultimately it's aesthetically pleasing. But certainly, if that's a need by the city, we'd be willing to accommodate. The camp is more than willing to ensure that safety is the utmost premium for the individuals who are surrounding the camp and inside the camp. And
dead campers are not good for your
injured is just as bad. But what I will do is I will have folks look into it as the types of potential fencing, and we'll just, if acceptable to the camp, I guess we can either just have it informal, have someone come out during the process. I'll call staff and have them come out and just let us know what their thoughts are.
Let me interject. Do you know if a building permit is required?
A building permit is required, yes.
Okay, so that'll be part of it.
We are going through...
Go ahead, that's fine.
No,
the second part of that, and now with Mr. Garcia, is my concern is whether or not the building department would pick up the need for a guardrail. Secondly, you own the wall, the sidewalk's owned by the city. Is there a hold harmless, some sort of agreement in place that when their campers go careening over the wall and hit city property, the city will be held harmless?
We wouldn't be liable anyway, so I'm not sure we would have that process assuming the design of the cul-de-sac was approved by our city engineer. we wouldn't be liable anyway. So I'm not sure if that's a requirement that we put on for those types of permits.
So some poor camper goes wandering off, had a fight with his girlfriend, wants to be alone, wanders over here, gets, something in his eye and falls off that retaining wall, the city's not liable.
That's right.
Okay. They might have a problem.
Yes.
Okay. Well, as long as the city doesn't have the problem. But I would urge you to look at that feature.
I will. And the final question was, as far as a permit is required, yes, it is being reviewed by building safety, engineering, traffic, so on and so forth.
Okay. You said the final, follow-up question, now that we have you in front of us and you're not hearing things secondhand. Other questions for the speaker?
Nothing further from me.
Let's talk quickly about the planting schedule. I'm not familiar with that product. Is that a hedge or is that ground cover?
It's an actual bush. After speaking with Teresa Proskowitz, she instructed that the plants themselves be what's called non-invasive. Let me get this specific.
Non-invasive?
Non-invasive trees, and so the items here are bushes themselves.
Right, but so the idea that the bush so it's not just simple ground cover, it's a bush that will expand and become maybe considered a light hedge or some sort of separation.
That's correct.
Kind of speaks to the whole idea of not having people wander off the edge of the cliff.
Correct. Not being a landscape engineer myself, all I am aware of is that I've seen a photograph of it, and it looks like what I would consider a bush.
How do you establish it? Is there any irrigation?
It's a manual irrigation as needed. One of the things we had discussed with the urban forester specifically was the issue of whether or not irrigated plants would be required versus non-irrigated plants. They agreed that given the natural surrounding of the camp, using plants that wouldn't require installation of an irrigation system and therefore maintenance was acceptable, provided during the initial year the hand watering occurred as needed.
It's irrigation or watering to establish.
Manzanita is native and drought tolerant.
And that was my next question, is it native? And
Yeah, it is.
Is it fire resistant? Yes. Look at you.
That I don't know.
I believe it is reasonably fire resistant. And because
I'm not sure. I think it's either very fire resistant or not very fire resistant. I don't know that.
Okay.
Some fire areas where the manzanita bushes were still, the trunks were still standing.
Yeah.
Well, I believe the camp has plenty of eucalyptus to serve as.
Highly, very smooth red bark that people like to. We always used to be told when I was a kid that it was illegal to chop down manzanita because people like to chop it down, take it home, and make decorative doodads out of it. Coffee tables and what have you.
Do you have any questions for the speaker? Any questions for the speaker? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, sir. I had another speaker card. Do you wish to address us? All right. James Couch. And at one point you had hit owner on the property. That's why I started to call you. I see you crossed that out.
Yeah. James Couch, I live at 1044 Shirley Jean, and I didn't come here to oppose the project at all. I just wanted to hear the scope. I've been at that residence for over 10 years now, probably 12. And so I'm adjacent to where the project is going to be. And I hadn't heard the scope until last November. This project has been ongoing since I moved there in '98. We were supposed to get a cul-de-sac. So I'm a little concerned about when things go up right away, and none of the residents in that area, which still live there, knew that it was going to be happening until I proceeded to ask the director of the camp what's going on when I found stakes in my yard, which are still there now, that they were being surveyed. So I do have some concern about the project. I know the area very well. Whether it's kids do come right up to that fence, because that's where my fence is, and they do play, and campers do come down there. It is a very poorly policed area, and some of my concerns is the parking, because we get a lot of campers coming in, their parents coming in, parking right at my driveway. So I do have some concerns. And it's the kind of concern that could be alleviated very easily by little knowledge. So residents, which is 6 of us, and we all have kids that play in that street, didn't have any knowledge of this. So that's our frustration. And we're not opposed to it. We just want to make sure that it's done by code, city enforcement, and things happen as they say they're going to happen. And just recently, we've had increase of activity at the camp. And being there 10 years, it was a very quiet area. That's why we moved there. That's why all the families live there. Not being a teacher for 35 years, I'm not opposed to kids playing. That's my life. I'm just concerned about all the other activity that's coming into the area. We've had filming 6 times in the last 3 months. So I understand that the cul-de-sac needs to be built to help the traffic, but is that the reason just for the traffic of the camp buses, or is it for something else? And I just would like the board to question that before we put our final stamp of approval on this.
Is that what the vehicles that are there now, is that part of the
Yes.
filming?
Yes. True
Right.
blood.
True Blood?
Yeah.
Starring?
And I'm not opposed to filming either. My daughter, my oldest daughter, is a location manager, so I understand.
So you know all about
So
that.
The process.
Don't get me wrong. I'm just concerned about the lack of information given to the residents in that area.
Have you had good reception from the camp
Yes,
leadership?
and it was supposed. This project was supposed to start last September, and we were all ready for it last August. But then I called the city, and there was no plans given. So that's the kind of thing that concerns me, and a red flag goes up. And that's the only reason I sat here patiently to hear the plans, because I live right next door.
Yeah, I saw it right at the end there.
Right
Right at the driveway.
Well, let's ask staff.
Okay.
What's the notification requirements for this project?
This is a public hearing, so we noticed property owners within 500 feet a minimum of 10 days ago.
That's
Was
correct.
So
Right.
you didn't know about it
10 days.
Because at first I thought you said you knew nothing of it. But contemporarily, within the
I think,
10 days.
right, I think that was the issue, because I know another staff member has been working with the applicant for a period of time, I don't know how long, and to get the plans in order, and they were submitted, and then I took over. So I think this has been in the works for a while, but it hasn't been an official project for a while, and this is the first public hearing at which notices were required.
Let me ask you, so are you complaining that because you're not included in the
Well,
design process?
I'll give you,
as this-
since I live there and I've been there for some time, prior camp management informed everyone what was going on. And we knew that the cul-de-sac was coming. We even knew the scope of it. Present camp management, which has been less than 2 years now, told us it was supposed to start in August, and there were plans. Well, I checked, and there were no plans. Matter of fact, it was not even a city requirement. That I've heard that the city is requiring this, and that kind of frustrates me because the city is not requiring. I've lived in Glendale for 35 years.
I think that I tried to track down where that requirement came from. I didn't find the exact person, but I know it has been throughout these little projects. The city has finally said, "Listen, we're not going to entertain any more little projects for the camp until this cul-de-sac is built."
What does that mean in the city? I mean, the city is...
Public Works?
Is it Public Works? Is it the city
Well,
engineer?
And that's what I was trying to track down. I was trying to track down the department, but I couldn't. So in the 6 or 7 little SR review applications that you've done over the past, I think, 10 years, at some point there have been comments from a city department. I talked to Public Works and Fire. It may be one of them. I just didn't I didn't get a for sure answer because the people I spoke with probably were not around.
And it's probably not on the record anywhere as
Well, when
a
this
condition for
this
anything.
is
so.
the project. I mean, the camp has sort of evolved, and as the little projects have come in, people from the city have come and gone. So.
Not saying that a cul-de-sac's not a good idea. It's just kind of interesting to hear that it's, the city wants this and the city wants that. And I always like to have a department or go-to name when somebody says the city.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't like what the city's making me do, or if I like it, I can go to the right place.
The applicant had indicated they may have some information, so we'll hear from them on that.
And then, Coach, I have another comment.
Yeah, please.
Sure.
If it's any consolation to you, in my residential neighborhood, drive down the street and all of a sudden one day get almost hit head on by a dump truck because somebody's gotten a permit to build a house 25 feet from your house. And since there were no conditional use permits or variances required, none of the neighbors were notified. All of a sudden, you don't know anything about it. All of a sudden, one day, your whole house is dusty and your life is over for the next 3 years because they're building houses all around you. So we have the same complaints. I have the same complaints.
I understand that, and that's why my original statement was I didn't come here to oppose the project. It was just some of the things I heard. I started to say, okay, that's not what I've been hearing for the last 10 years.
Yeah, figure out what's going on.
And I'm sure there are 6 houses on that block. If I asked every neighbor, if they would have known the scope and some of the things that were said, they would have been here tonight. Because we're very, very close community.
The public hearing
Always have
notice,
been.
the public hearing notice described what the project was that they applied for.
How long has that sign been up?
Along the sign,
Yeah.
the sign is required to be up a minimum of 10 days
it's been
before.
up.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. But I'm
Sure, it's
also
been up 10 days?
we didn't hear otherwise, and we have the city clerk's office checks that, and if it's not, then we hear.
Like I said, it's a type of area, if you've ever been there, and I guess it's very secluded. No one ever comes up there. We like where we live. We love the camp. It's not that we just want to feel part of, and it's always have been. And I know it's growing. I know the economy is different. I understand that. But, we don't want to live in a metropolitan area such as South Glendale. That's why we moved up to North Glendale, because I did.
What was your
Did what I-
understanding about, from the old management, as to why the cul-de-sac was going in, and who was driving the effort?
My original understanding was because when it rains, it floods the streets, and the gravel comes down out of the camp, out of that one driveway. That was the original understanding. That was the reason that the cul-de-sac was going to be built. And I said, no problem. We don't need to drive through mud if it's going to be an issue. And the city was requiring it.
Okay.
The fact of the retaining wall and kids do not play next to that. Those kids
will play where they play.
They come right across the driveway every morning singing songs, which is great to wake up to. That's not an issue.
If you put up rails, the kids will tie ropes on the rails and climb down.
They already do that.
Build it and they will come.
Go ahead.
I have to ask this question, I'm sorry. I mean, he has a coach couch.
Coach Couch, cross country.
What did you coach?
I've coached cross country for 35 years, track and field for 35 years, and I coached basketball at Pierce College in Woodland Hills, women's basketball. So I've been involved with kids. That's why, and camps and the whole bit. So that's not the issue. And I've been in the Glendale area for 35 years, Burbank and Glendale for 35 years.
So my
Matter
sense
of fact,
is,
the first street you were talking about, I lived on Cypress.
all
when I
right.
first moved in.
My sense is, from what you've said, then, a cul-de-sac going in is not an issue, and a cul-de-sac would be a positive
Providing
attribute to
its
the neighborhood.
code is enforced, plus parking restrictions in cul-de-sacs. That's an issue with me, because that's right at the end of my driveway. and that it's hard to be enforced. It really is.
Well, cul-de-sacs are odd parking spots.
Yeah.
And they're difficult to get in and get out of, so I can understand your concern.
And it's a fire area. When we had the big fires coming over the hill 2 years ago, it's pleasure seeing the Glendale Fire Department parked right up into the cul-de-sac there. I mean,
yeah.
It's a nice area.
Yeah, right.
Do you belong
like-
to your neighborhood association?
I donate to the neighborhood association. Of course, I'm so busy I can't get involved with because there's an association there.
Is that Whiting Woods?
No,
No,
it's the one next to it. It's the
other Woodlands. There's another.
Verdugo Woodland.
Verdugo Woodlands. It's not Whiting. Whiting is just
Well,
north.
the only
of us.
reason I asked was, obviously, the camp would probably be well-served to communicate effectively with your association.
Sure.
And if you knew who the current president was, that's where I was going from.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for this speaker? All right,
Thank you for your
sir.
time.
All right.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question on that. I come forward for your rebuttal. I have a question for that. Is there restrictions on the property in terms of number of filmings per year?
Not to my knowledge, but I didn't. I
don't
didn't
know.
look at that. The city clerk, I believe, issues film permits. I don't know whether they have criteria that they use in terms of, okay, a property can serve as a location for a film 5 times a year. I'm not sure whether there are any limits like that.
That might be something of interest for you to check on, Mr. Couch, just in terms of that. And I know with your daughter in the industry, you're on very thin ice, exactly. All right, comments?
Sure, I'll just
rebuttal
quickly
time.
respond to the questions
Yes.
that he had. Very quickly, as far as the history of what was going on here, 2000, 2001, the camp had a series of items that they wanted to install at that point in time. Just like any development project, is my understanding the city at that point asserted that just when you're building a shopping center, we want you to widen the road and install a cul-de-sac. That is a city standard. My understanding is requested by the fire department for fire trucks to be able to turn around at the end of the street. There's no formal hammerhead installed. There's no technical city code way of turning emergency vehicles around. Although the fire department has been there, although there's a good relationship between the camp and the fire department, it technically does not meet code, and therefore it was something that asserted was this is a nexus to the projects that you want to install. We'd like a cul-de-sac to go in. That was more of a grand plan, multiple activities at once. Essentially what happened is an attempt to, I don't want to use the word sidestep, but to minimize the amount of construction out there, they became just small little projects that ended up staying under the radar, where none of which in their individual size would warrant the installation of a cul-de-sac. But even in 2000 and 2001, when the grander plans were contemplated, actual engineering drawings were designed and submitted into the city for the cul-de-sac itself, and we actually received comments back. And then, like I said, everything kind of got scaled back, and it became a series of very small projects, none of which were large enough, we'll say, to trigger the city's mandate that a cul-de-sac be installed. The city in the future has desire to expand potentially the number of move cabins and build new facilities, and it just is understood it's always been there. If you want to start doing some of these bigger things, you're going to have to install a cul-de-sac.
But who's directing that? Where's the document? Where's the...
Truthfully, the question as to whether or not there's a formal document that I've received for this, the answer is I don't have one. All I know is that I have from the records a set of drawings that was reviewed, and my understanding is I don't know the individual because it's from almost 10 years ago, but the truth of the matter is if you were to say, don't build it, I'll send 250 kids to camp this year that can't go to camp.
I think this is crazy that we're sitting here and nobody has a freaking document that requires you to do this, and you're about to spend $300,000 plus. This is insane.
Because I don't know what the document was, but it was 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Literally, I have a set of drawings. And in fact, the radius at that point was a 32-foot radius, and now it's a 35-foot radius because city has adjusted its standards where they want a sidewalk along with a 3-foot landscape setback. Now, that being said, I can appreciate that particular issue. Candidly, the only reason I'm here asking for Planning Commission approval is the actual wall. It's a technicality. The reason we started this process a year and a half ago, didn't think we were going to need a retaining wall, Engineering took a look at it, determined the retaining wall would be the best thing for the installation of the cul-de-sac. I guess the city has a requirement because counter staff.
It's a gentle slope now.
It's on a general
and you gotta
slope. You
cut
got to dig into
it
the slope.
to
and
make the
so
35-foot radius.
instead of grading deeper into the camp, it was decided to potentially install a retaining wall. I met with counter staff, at which point they spoke with the city attorney and said, I guess a retaining wall above a certain height, whether it be 3 feet or 4 feet, requires planning commission approval. Candidly, that is the reason I'm standing here today.
Well, any development in an SR zone requires planning commission approval.
Which is fine. Even the counter staff who I'd spoken to on that day, and I don't recall what her name was, it was an issue, but I'm here nonetheless.
Well, also back in Oakmont was going on in 2001, 2002, and one of the big discussions that came on about the Oakmont project was the fact that fire safety. Oakmont 5 was fire safety. And one of the things that had happened is that the fire department and the traffic department had gone around in different streets in the area, all around the area, for purposes of fire safety. Are the streets suitable? Can the fire trucks get through? So that was kind of going on at the same time as there was I think it was a big remodel or a construction on I think it was a retaining wall and a remodel of was it a kitchen and a dining hall at the end of the site, at the end of the project? And so as a result of that, one of the discussions that came on was, is it safe to get access? And so one of the things that was being looked at was potential. I think there at one time they were looking at paving the parking area that was all bark in front. They were looking at potential of putting in a bridge or some sort of an all-weather access. There was basically an access point now that's, I think it's a bridge or a rail car or something that acts as a bridge, and they were looking at, well, should that be elevated? So there was a lot of engineering that was going on in questions of, is it safe for drainage? Is it safe for fire? One of the things that came out of that review was this is one of those streets where we have a potential for have a lot of kids up there, a lot of people up there, assembly uses. Can we get everybody out in a fire? Can we get fire equipment up? Is there adequate emergency access? And so I think that's part of the reason why some of the plans were done at that time, and I wasn't directly involved in that. I remember it was going on because I was working on Oakmont 5, and I remember this was going on at the same time, and they were saying, well, we need to look at fire safety in the entire area. And so this was just one of those areas that they were looking at in the hillsides near Oakmont 5. And so that might be, I'm just throwing it out there for what it's worth. It's probably where it came from. I do know that the city engineer and the fire department were very concerned with that issue in that area.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea, and clearly these people are going to throw $300,000 or so at it. But I can't believe that somebody said, hey, it might be a good idea to do this, and $300,000 and some years later, we've got people throwing money at something that may not be required, probably would be, could be. It's just unbelievable. There's no documentation to direct these people to do what they've done over the last few years.
I understand.
Crazy. God bless you, but
the truth is the problem we're going to run into is this. I think if there's ever going to be a requirement, and I think we can all agree that there's going to come a day, potentially, that someone's going to step up and say, we want a cul-de-sac. I got the money donated right now to do it, and I think we should just get it done.
I understand why you're doing it.
By the way, I appreciate your comment because, truthfully, when I heard of the requirement, as a developer, it makes sense. You do street work. You want to do something on a site. This is what you have to help provide.
Quid pro quo, right?
I understand, and so therefore, I think the camp always looked at it as being that sort of quid pro quo. They also looked at it as being a good citizen to the community. That obviously this doesn't meet standards. There currently is an erosion problem, which is being addressed by this wall. There are special drains being installed to address issues of erosion, so on and so forth. So it becomes something that, you're right, there's no formal document, but it looks like it's probably the right thing to do. And you're right, it's a lot of money. And hopefully we can get the cost down because...
Yeah, okay, we get that. It's all right. You don't have to belabor it. I'm there.
As far as because it looks like you had a couple of questions about children in the street. There are 2 staff for every 10 campers at all times. At any point even when they cross through the area near the neighbor's house. I only say that because I know the issue of safety had come up.
I've taken 3 kids to Disneyland. That's not enough.
So as far as filming does occur on a camp. It helps cover the cost. I know that in recent times the neighbors have been compensated for their cooperation in these instances. Obviously, to have a camp that's not functioning year-round with that number of kids, to have some dollars come in to help maintain the camp in these months is quite helpful. My understanding is that the camp tries to work with the neighbors as best as possible as far as preparing them for that. In regards to the cul-de-sac, the reason we thought we were going to start in September and we're now pushed to here is purely because last year I wasn't expecting to be in Planning Commission. It only came, although it sounds like I was going to have to anyways, truthfully, but for the retaining wall, when the original design was no retaining wall, I was under the impression, based on engineering reviewing it and counter staff at the planning department, that a Planning Commission approval was
Again,
not
we're kind of like your design review, so.
Sounds like that.
We basically get cell towers, retaining walls, and bathrooms.
There you go.
Fun golf courses.
There you go.
I got to,
Cell phones,
for my 2
bathrooms.
cents worth, it sounds to me like staff needs to improve communication with the neighbors, because at some point, people's sentiments are going to turn on a dime. You've got a gentleman that's very, sounds pretty supportive of the camp, but he's starting to get irritated. People aren't communicating effectively with him. That's not your role, I understand that. But perhaps the lady that's sitting behind you, or the testimony, or you'll carry the message forward. You guys got to start doing a better job with the neighbors. And you're getting real borderline. If you're doing 6 film shoots in a year, that's getting really borderline as well. But I'll leave that up to the neighborhood. I mean, if they're getting compensated and they're not complaining, that's their problem. But I just got to observe, the whole good neighbor thing, it probably needs to be revitalized, for what that's worth. Other questions to the speaker? Anything else you want to share with us?
No.
Okay. It's getting late. The more you talk, it's probably going to get worse for you.
I am hungry.
Okay.
You're presenting in front of a starving planning commission.
And that was facetious, obviously, not a real threat. Any closing comments from staff?
No.
Good call. Comments from commissioners? Someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion, or Mr.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, the old
Glass.
glass. And by the way, it's actually Mr. Torgerson's turn.
What? Go ahead.
Okay, I'll do it.
He's got his glasses.
Upon consideration after reviewing the records, files, and staff report dated April 15, 2009, and all documentary evidence submitted with regard to SR Zone Development Plan Review 2009-001, said is hereby approved, subject to compliance with conditions contained in the staff report and listed below. And for the record, there are 4 planning department requirements. There are 4. I guess you could call them
right.
planning department requirements. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's up to 15 total, 16 total requirements, some of which are public works, some of which are planning, some of which are Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Division requirements. And those are all part of the motion.
I second it.
Motion, support, call roll, please.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheets,
Aye.
Commissioner Torgerson,
Aye.
Chairperson Kay.
Aye, and a vote of 4-0. PSR 2009-001 has been approved. Moving on to 9B, zoning administrator's decisions were attached. Anything else from planning department updates?
That's
What's coming up in our next meeting?
I do have a comment.
Well, we're waiting for comments. What's coming up at our next meeting?
We have one appeal, and now I guess we have a continued item. You'll have one item that's going to be the findings for your project that was on today.
That's it?
That's it.
Oh, good. We'll make up for a 4-hour meeting. Comments from commissioners?
I'd like to request to be put on the agenda for this commission to consider. While I was in Korea, I took a trip to Korea and looked at some of the application of the green energy, high technology. I'd like to make the presentation before the board, and also maybe for the benefit of some of the other departments pertaining to the subject, to propose a corridor, high-tech corridor, somewhere in the city of Glendale, designated as a high-tech corridor, and to implement or to look at the application of the green energy, renewable energy, and so on.
Let me build on that. I think that's, a great idea. Obviously, during the election campaign, there were a lot of things bandied about. I know one of the elected council people had talked about using San Fernando as perhaps an artist corridor. Somebody else had suggested a green energy corridor. So I'd like to hear from staff kind of the directions they're going in, whether they're waiting for council response, and I think building on what you're asking, the steps you would take to create the impetus or the impetus for corridors to actually come into play. What kind of planning actions you would contemplate?
Well, anytime we look at studying a change to what would be an existing code, because essentially if you're going to designate something, you're going to have a method to do that. We would look at policy first. We would want to look at what you're proposing to do. So if you're looking at examples or something that has been done in Korea, what we would want to do is call the appropriate departments in, especially if you're looking at something that might affect GWP or Public Works. And we would want to have them start studying the issue. If you came in and gave a presentation, then we would expect that perhaps the Planning Commission would give us direction to go talk to the city manager and other departments and start the conversation going. It's generally how it starts.
Would you kind of, and for example, this is going to come at you. I mean, let's be honest. You have a council member who made that a statement, and I'm sure that council person will ask about it. When you are approached by interested parties, whether it's council people or commission members or whatever, do you respond not just with that, but you also maybe explain what the mix is in Glendale? Like, where is our industrial base? What little is left? What is zoned for that? If you create this corridor, what are you impacting as far as, let's say, the whole picture in the body?
Well, if we were going to analyze any type of a zone change or a new district, then we go through the same procedure we would for any type of a general plan amendment. I mean, yes, there would be review. However, before it even gets to that point, we would take your direction, and that would go to Hassan, and he would talk to the city manager about scheduling and about what's the best way to approach that issue. If it's basically coming from staff, because we work for the city manager, and so he's the one that we seek direction from and how best he feels that could be implemented. But generally, when we do a general plan amendment, this is for anyone that we would have. We do meet with other departments. We get everybody together. We do research, make sure that everybody has input at a staff level of what such a change could mean. We look for direction, especially if we're looking for like a high-tech corridor, something that could have a big impact on our development services. We would definitely want to include them because I'm assuming this is a job generation opportunity. So we would want to include a lot of other departments in the discussion. And then again, it's our direction would come from the city manager. I'm sure we would, generally what happens is we give a report to the city council and get direction from them. But when it starts, we definitely do research first among the staff. So when we talk to the city manager, we have some background with it, and so he knows what to bring forth to the council.
Just to add onto that, I really like the idea, and I had some issues in the past that actually some were stolen by the council candidates this time, but I've always, as an example, and I'm trying to figure out how this might fit into what Mr. Lee is presenting. I can't tell you how many years ago I found out that the water coming out into the LA River, which I found out later was the water reclamation plan, all that water was we were taking the time and effort to clean the water, and it was being thrown into the LA River, which it still to this day doesn't make sense to me. It's like 80% of the water that we get out of the reclaimed water is going in the LA River, even with the so-called effort that we have to use reclaimed water along the freeway right-of-ways and at the parks and some of the schools. So I think that, in my mind, I think we can incorporate some of that thinking in this approach to that, and the fact that we have a jewel in our city as far as the trash.
I want to hear the end of this sentence.
Well, the nexus, the connection to these two are, 80% of this water is thrown away, and 50 or 60% of our water that we can't afford today is being used for irrigation. Somehow in that 80% being thrown away and the 50% that is just landscape watering, I think we can make that up and not have to buy the water from somewhere else in the state. We already have it. Reuse it. I think there's a financial connection there, which would fit well into the green technology. And the other piece, we can only go so much longer, given maybe another 20 years, putting trash into Shoal Canyon. If we start today, we might be lucky enough to have some other way, some other method. It doesn't look like us carting our trash somewhere else, because not only are we putting the trash in, but other cities are putting the trash into our dump site. They don't have a dump site. We do. We have a commodity available of trash coming to our city that if we looked into that kind of technology, which would fit into the green technology arena, we could save money. We spend money up front to save money later, but we're going to get there. It's going to hit us much sooner than we realize, and we will not be able to afford an alternative source of dumping trash any better than we'll be able to afford to put some technology in that'll burn the trash or somehow get rid of it and create energy in the interim. So my long route is getting to, he mentioned a corridor. I would want to incorporate those kind of thoughts that may or may not be within a corridor, but might be within a concept or an idea of green technology and doing them for the right reasons to improve the green technology and to help the city save money and make money. So I don't know how we link that.
I don't know how we agendize that. I mean,
Well,
that's
the start is to go with Mr. Lee's idea. I like it, but I want to throw that out because it's in the back of my mind to maybe link that.
Mr. Chair, I would like to suggest that we agendize Mr. Lee to give the Planning Commission a report on what he observed on his trip as far as green corridors. Then the second thing is we could ask the Planning Department to have the Department of Water Power or whatever, the urban forester or whatever, come in and tell us about what green programs the city of Glendale has already got in the works and already thinking about.
Well, my thought is
Then we got a full set of things that we could consider, and we could further agendize a little after the Planning Commission regular agenda discussion on what types of things we might want to recommend to the city council.
I wanted to focus on green energy, but high tech applications.
Right. Exactly.
Let me ask this.
We can sit around and wave our hands all we want and say how great it'd be to be green, but let's have some specific
So
high-tech.
you have a suggestion for an agenda item from us. I don't believe we can actually task the planning department. I believe that actually does come from the city manager.
That's correct.
Is that correct, Mr. Garcia?
That's correct.
So we can only suggest and urge.
Right.
And what you should suggest the city manager and share with interested parties on council is that the planning commission has real interest in looking at these things and maybe moving the discussion forward to a city council perspective sooner than later. And ask the city manager if he would entertain, tasking your resources appropriately to agendize those things for us to spend some time with ourselves. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
I would just add, Mr. Chair, that some of the concepts I think that you just briefly mentioned, for example, maybe talking about issues with the landfill, those are going to come under the purview of either a different commission or the council. Things related to how, maybe like green corridors for green technology, that sort of thing. Obviously, it's more of a land use issue, and we'll come back to some of those things. Though may have to go to a broader group, such as the council, or maybe the council and the planning commission.
A lot of these things are interdisciplinary.
Right. Sure. Right.
Affect a lot of committees, a lot of departments, and so on.
Okay. I just wanted, just so you're aware of that. Some of that
noted.
Maybe
way to
outside
keep us out of trouble.
Okay.
Just start the ball rolling.
Any other comments from commission? Can we have a unanimous motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Please, press the gavel. All right. Thank you, everyone.